Chapter 248. In the winter of Bran year 555, the northern wilderness tribes officially attacked the Bran border. Within 2 days, they created a gap in the Grey Flame army's defense line and quickly took over Mountain Pass. At this point, the flames of war spread in all directions. This was almost every time the northern wilderness tribes launched a large-scale attack, and it worked every time. The reason was that the Bran border was too long, and it was too difficult to defend. Of course, every time the same routine was used, the northern wilderness barbarians would eventually be chased out of the Bran border. The only difference was the length of time. Therefore, the Bran people did not care about the result of this war. If it ended quickly, the people in the south would not even know about it. Only the people in the north would suffer. The war was not only about the soldiers, but also about the country's strength. Therefore, during this period, they would have to pay more taxes. If they were not careful and ran into the barbarians who sneaked past the defense line, it was almost certain that the entire village would be wiped out. Of course, the Grey Coat army in the hinterland of the 100,000 Mountains did not know about this. Therefore, they were all surprised by the sudden change in the negotiation, and were also celebrating this hard-earned reward. Although the army camp was still there, the main generals and most of the soldiers had already returned to their respective armies. As for the Lord's soldiers at the valley entrance, they had also returned to their own territories. The negotiation had ended, so they were not worried that the Grey Coat army would go back on their words. After all, this would only anger the Empire and cause more ferocious attacks. There was no other use. In these few days, piles of resources were piled up from the back. Food, flour, blankets, armor, weapons, and even a few boxes of explosive crystals. Finally, on the 4th morning after the negotiation, Rosa and the rest led the group of dazed young nobles to the junction between the army camp and the army camp. At this time, at the entrance of the camp, there was a small farewell. Haha, I'm very touched. Everyone is sending me off together. It's training time now, so, you know. F***CK. The people gathered here were the members of the Grey Space and Philip. The negotiation had ended, and the exchange had begun. After that, the Grey Coat army would set off again in search of a new hidden base. Although Philip had been living here peacefully for the past few days, he had also established friendships with Tang, Un, and David. But after all, his status was there, so it was naturally not suitable for him to move forward with the others. Hey, we've known each other for a while now. I've helped you a lot, treated you to a lot of meat, and then, after joking around, Philip suddenly started counting his contributions with his fingers in a serious manner. Everyone looked at each other. Finally, David said impatiently, "Stop. What are you trying to say?" Philip bowed solemnly. "So, please help me keep an eye on Josiah. If there's any brat who doesn't know what's good for him, we won't hold back." Everyone was speechless. Tang In said in a slightly surprised tone, "What's the use of helping you look after her? We won't have any interactions in the future, right?" This was the truth. After all, Philip was part of the negotiation team, so after the end of the negotiations, he had to report back to the south. This was undoubtedly the opposite of the Grey Coat army that was about to move. "I asked someone else to look after her. You can forget about it, lest you steal what you're supposed to." Philip glanced at him and said bluntly, "Tang," and touched his nose. Then, Philip raised his eyebrows and revealed a mysterious smile. "Who says we won't have any interactions? Maybe we'll have more opportunities to meet in the future. I'm leaving. If you go to Bran City one day, just mention my name, and I guarantee that you'll have a smooth journey. I'll take care of all your food, drinks, and entertainment." After saying that, Philip jumped into the carriage and left. TSK. It seems that nobles aren't all detestable. David sighed. "Let's go. Hurry up. I want to bid farewell to the goddess Josiah." Impatient shouts could be faintly heard from the carriage. "I take back what I said just now." Tang In nodded expressionlessly. Then he said, "Let's go. Let's scout the surroundings." Although the soldiers of the Legion had now retreated, the Grey Coat army did not dare to be careless. No one could tell if this was a ploy. For example, after they left happily with the supplies, they would be surrounded halfway. Therefore, the Gray Coat Army sent out all the scouts to sweep the surrounding dozens of kilometers. As for Tang En's participation, it was purely to train the new members. At the same time, he also observed the surroundings to see if there were any suitable places to set up camp. At 9 o'clock in the morning, after checking the types and quantities of the goods and waiting for the reports from the scouts, there were no mistakes. The Gray Coat Army and the old nobles officially completed a bandit-like transaction. They exchanged goods and people. There were no accidents, and the exchange was completed quickly. Naturally, there was no need for both sides to exchange pleasantries. After sending away Philip, who was shamelessly bidding farewell to Josiah, the Gray Coat Army rushed back to the camp with the carriages full of supplies. Half an hour later, the Gray Coat Army set off and left the original site. Haha, so many things. Aunt Rosa, just the food alone is enough for us to use for a few months. Josiah looked at the mountain of supplies behind him. The soldiers had to push the carriages forward. He could not help but open his mouth and laugh without caring about his image. Rosa nodded happily. Just as she was about to say something, she was interrupted by a burst of bold laughter. Haha, our little Rosa, this is not just food. With this equipment, the combat power of the soldiers will also be raised to a higher level, old General Omeng said with a smile. The Gray Coat Army soldiers were limited in knowledge. It was undoubtedly difficult to improve in tactics. But now that they had these armors, at least they would not be at a disadvantage in terms of combat power. Ah, old General Omeng, you're laughing at me again. Josiah cried out involuntarily. Then he bit his lips tightly. She only found out about the news circulating in the camp after the negotiations ended a few days ago. When Josiah first found out, other than being happy to be confirmed, he was terrified. She admired Rosa and Tang and the most. Now that she had received the title of Little Rosa, she was undoubtedly ashamed. Old General Omeng shook his head and laughed. Haha, how is this mocking? This is a very high praise. Besides, this is what the Gray Coat Army's people collectively call you. You deserve it. If it was an ordinary leader, he would probably be on guard at this time. However, Rosa pursed her lips and smiled at the side. The rumors that suddenly emerged in the camp were also related to her. Ever since the conversation with Tang En, Rosa was ready to help Josiah become the hero of the Gray Coat Army. Letting her join the negotiation team was the first step. The follow-up publicity was naturally spread out. Now, it seemed that the effect was unexpectedly good. Everyone had seen Josiah's performance in the past few months. His noble status, which was originally a hindrance, had now become an undeniable driving force. In addition, the noble and mysterious magician profession added to the persuasion. Therefore, with this opportunity, his reputation naturally increased infinitely. Josiah was even more embarrassed by old General Omeng's teasing. He immediately changed the topic. Aunt Rosa, when Philip left, why did he tell me that there would be a lot of opportunities to meet the Gray Coat Army? Rosa raised her eyebrows and chuckled. Why, you think of that guy now. Well, although he is a noble, he is indeed quite handsome. More importantly, he boldly confessed his love. Josiah opened his mouth and was speechless. She suddenly realized that her ability to change the topic was not good. Philip, maybe we will meet often in the future. Rosa stopped when she was ahead. Her tone suddenly became a little excited. Josiah secretly sighed in relief and hurriedly asked why. Well, do you know the group of new nobles? I know. Josiah was stunned for a moment, then nodded in response. Most of the nobles in the Bran Kingdom were meritorious officials who had followed Emperor Bran the First to develop the kingdom. They either had outstanding military achievements or had provided financial help. Therefore, after the kingdom was truly established, each of them received their due rewards. These families had developed for many years, and their power was complicated and could be said to be terrifying. Now, the ministers who held great power in the royal court were basically from these families. After that, many new nobles were rewarded for their various achievements. However, when they tried to climb up the pyramid of power, they found that it had long been cleaned up and there was no place for them to set foot in. This undoubtedly made them very dissatisfied, and thus, conflict arose. This conflict was almost irreconcilable, and because of this, the two sides engaged in an intense battle. The old nobles called these new nobles the nouveau riche, and similarly, the new nobles called them old vermin. They only knew how to seize everything, but did not contribute to the development of the kingdom. The battle between the two sides could be said to have a long history. Generally speaking, the old nobles had the advantage. After all, they occupied the upper echelons of the kingdom and had a deeper foundation. Could it be that Philip is... Josiah said hesitantly. It was no wonder that he had such a reaction. It was really that Philip was not serious all day long, and he looked really unreliable. That's right. Rosa nodded. Philip is the representative of the new nobles, and he should be the kind with quite a high status. A few days ago, he and I talked about the philosophy of the new nobles. It has some similarities with our gray coat army. Then Aunt Rosa agreed to join the new nobles? Josiah asked anxiously. How is that possible? Rosa shook her head and laughed involuntarily. This is just the first contact, and he's just laying down the groundwork. Unless our gray coat army's strength has improved greatly and has a certain amount of authority. Moreover, when that time comes, we won't be joining, but cooperating. These words were very realistic, but the truth was indeed so. Because the new nobles did not have the advantage in overall strength, they would naturally seek allies in various aspects. However, allies also had to have weight, and those who were dragging them down naturally would not do. If the gray coat army had a certain level of strength, then the new nobles would not mind pulling them in. That's right, the gray coat army's philosophy was to raise the status of the commoners and conflict with the nobles. However, what they needed was only the gray coat army's support in the parliamentary votes after they entered the political arena. Therefore, at least in the beginning, they had common interests. That was more than enough. Why? You don't seem to like the new nobles? Rosa asked with a smile. Josiah hesitated before finally saying, I feel that the nobles are not reliable. You're a noble. But in this aspect, the nobles are indeed not popular. We have a lot of potential, haha. Rosa teased, then said seriously, whether they're reliable or not, it doesn't matter much. If we cooperate, we're just each taking what we need. Just as the new nobles needed allies, the gray coat army also needed help. If this group of new nobles could help at a crucial time, their chances of success would undoubtedly be higher. I understand. Josiah nodded. Although he was still a little worried, Rosa was undoubtedly more knowledgeable than him. Moreover, that was a matter for a long time, and it was just a thought now. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 249. Time passed unknowingly in the mountains. The cold wind was still as sharp as a knife. No one expected that the gray coat army's relocation would take an entire week. The reason was naturally because they couldn't find a suitable place to set up camp. The Shirwan Mountains terrain was strange, and there were all kinds of barren hills and unruly rivers. Logically speaking, it was relatively easy to find a hidden camp. However, because they had to consider the big character poster plan, this place couldn't be too far away from villages and cities. Under such conditions, it wasn't easy to find a safe place that wouldn't be noticed. However, after Tangen's suggestion, Rosa and the others were surprised to find that, in fact, someone had already found such a place for them. Without any hesitation, the Gray Coat Army cleanly eliminated a group of medium-sized bandits and occupied the other party's mountain stronghold. The bandits chose a remote place so that they wouldn't be easily attacked by the government. Moreover, it was necessary to be near villages and cities because it was easier to replenish supplies and dispose of the stolen goods. This was a small plain covered by mountains. Even if one looked down from above, they wouldn't notice this place. Moreover, this place was connected on all sides, so there were many escape routes. If the Gray Coat Army hadn't made sufficient preparations at the beginning of the encirclement, some of the bandits might have escaped. After confirming the location, the next step was to plan the reconstruction, send troops to set up a defense, scatter scouts, and so on. Quietly, the surrounding bandits didn't know that their neighbors had changed. Moreover, they quickly figured out their situation. After settling down, the Gray Coat Army naturally had to carry out the necessary activities for victory, the celebration party. Tang In still didn't participate. At this time, he was seizing the time to find all kinds of strange terrains and train the newly joined rookies. His contributions were undeniable, whether it was capturing the group of noble youths and forcing them to negotiate, or stepping forward to kill the strong enemy when the camp was in chaos. It should be said that he was the true hero of the Gray Coat Army. However, some people with ulterior motives spread rumors that were very unfavorable to him. Tang In didn't come out to explain for some reason. So now the people's feelings towards him were very complicated. Now that he did not attend the banquet to enjoy the festivities with the people, he eventually left a mysterious and strange impression in the minds of most of the Gray Coat Army citizens. Unlike Tang In's mixed comments, Josiah and Board were undoubtedly the main characters of this party. At this time, Rosa and the others had already learned about the invasion of the northern wilderness from their informants in the city. They finally understood why the other party was in a hurry to end the negotiations. However, they didn't make it public and still gave most of the credit to the two of them. The results of this negotiation were gratifying. The people received brand new cotton clothes and meat. The soldiers wore mighty armor, and they received a year's late pay. As such, the Gray Coat Army citizens were naturally even more grateful to Josiah and Selena, who had helped them obtain all of this. The titles Twin Stars of the Gray Coat Army and Little Luo Shah were now widely spread in the encampment. Rosa also timely promoted Josiah's position to the regimental level. There were a total of 4 regiments under the publicity department, and below them were various small groups. Josiah was considered to be at the middle upper level. At the same time, Board was also promoted 2 levels in the combat department. After all, this was a negotiation and had nothing to do with tactics. However, even so, he only needed to take 2 more steps forward, and he would be able to touch the position that Bull used to occupy. Old General Omeng also transferred him to his side and said that he would give him good guidance. After the celebration party, Rosa focused almost all of his attention on the big poster plan. In the past, they only focused on developing and shouting slogans. Their influence was actually very small. The most popular image in the market was even the image of the official mob thief. Now that Tang In had awakened them with Josiah's words, they finally prepared to take advantage of this stable period to prepare for external publicity. At this time, Tang In, who had just returned, was naturally recruited and was immediately invited to Rosa's small house. "Leader, you were looking for me?" Tang In knocked on the door and entered. "Yes," Rosa responded and put down a large stack of papers in front of him. He looked up and smiled. "How are the new members of the Gray Space? When I was in the valley, I heard that they were tormented by you." It's okay. Tang In touched his nose. This group of Gray Space members did not experience the cruel pursuit of the previous group, so their strength increased very slowly. Later, Tang In thought about it and simply divided them into groups and let the old members hunt them down. As long as they were killed, what awaited them was cruel punishment. This way, the effect was finally improved. Of course, the side effect was that a few members could not bear it and chose to quit. Those who quit were considered deserters and would naturally be laughed at in the camp. So, in the end, they finally told Tang In about the training and punishment methods to prove that they had done their best. These revealed methods caused quite a stir in the camp. The people of the Gray Coat Army were speechless, and the nickname of Tang In the Devil spread like wildfire. "Well, I believe in your way of teaching people." Although he did not understand, Rosa still expressed his support. Then he changed the topic. "Then, think of something to help with the big character poster plan." Tang In was stunned. "This is just writing propaganda slogans and then posting them." "Well, it's best to test it in the villages first. When it's mature, then go to the cities to promote it." "I know that." Rosa nodded. "I mean, what do you suggest in terms of content?" "Oh, this." Tang In touched his chin and thought for a while. "The content can be as varied as possible. There must be slogans and articles, but we also have to consider the problem of most civilians being illiterate. Well, I suggest using comics. Cough, cough, in the form of drawings. Drawings? Rosa frowned. This was something she had not considered before. Well, it's just like how the city tabloids depict scenes of aristocrats gathering, but you can make it more exaggerated. For example, draw a fat aristocrat with a big belly, holding a knife and fork in his hand, and the person on the plate in front of him is a sallow and skinny civilian in ragged clothes. Bang! Rosa slammed the table and looked excited. Good, good. Wait, I have to write this down, I have to write this down. The quill spun quickly, and then he hurriedly said, What else? Let me think. I can draw a noble sitting on a gold coin cart happily counting money, and then there are piles of bones under the gold coins. In fact, the content is not important. As long as it can reflect the suffering of civilians, expose the absurdity of the nobles, and finally draw a contrast. Leader, aren't you a noble before? You should be very familiar with this. The absurdity of the nobles. Rosa touched his forehead, and his face was flushed. That's too much. Haha, I know what to do. After a pause, Rosa stood up and bowed solemnly. Tang, thank you. Sigh, sometimes I really want to split open your brain and see what's inside. How can you come up with so many strange ideas? The matter was still the same. Everyone could see it. Just like how the nobles bullied the civilians, that was known to everyone. Some people wrote books, but few people responded. However, no one could think of using such an easy-to-understand method to advertise. This was the difference in concept and thinking. When Tang Yin saw Rosa's actions, he quickly stood up and bowed. Leader, you flatter me. I'm just a little smart. This was the truth. Tang Yin was just casually saying it based on what he had seen and heard in the future. If he really wanted to draw it, he was afraid that he would not be able to draw a simple human figure. As for what he had seen and heard, well, when he was young, he had seen too many shocking plans and slogans like, rather add 10 graves than add one person. Rosa shook his head. If this is a petty trick, I'd rather not have any great wisdom. Ahem, leader, that's about it. Do you really want me to admit that I'm being modest? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 250. The efficiency of the Gray Coat Army was naturally not as sluggish as the old members of Congress, especially with Rosa's personal attention. So, in less than 2 days, the preparation work for the big character poster plan had been announced. The next step was to see the actual results. At dawn, the night had not faded. Tang Yin, Josiah, and some young men and women stood in the shadows not far from the entrance of the encampment. These people were from the publicity department and were now Josiah's subordinates. Among them, Colin, whom Tang Yin had once pranked, was also among them. Tang, is this the symbol of the gray space? It's very domineering. Josiah pointed at Tang Yin's left chest and asked in surprise. Tang Yin was now wearing black armor, and the place where he pointed was branded with a skull symbol pierced by a dagger. It could barely be considered domineering, but it still gave people a feeling of terror, darkness, and bloodthirst. Yeah. Tang Yin touched his nose, slightly embarrassed. Branding the gray space with a symbol was an idea that Tang Yin had long had. It could serve as a symbol and unite people, just like the corporate culture in the modern world. But at that time, he thought that a dagger would be enough. But somehow, little Carol found out about this. So, she ran to the blacksmith alone and found the grandpa who helped her make the scythe. She skillfully said in Tang Yin's name that she wanted to add a skull. And in the end, it became like this. Thinking of this, Tang Yin could not help but complain. How could a little girl's thoughts be so violent and bloody? Did I teach her bad things? But this is also good. If a kitten or puppy was branded on it, the gray space would not be able to go out and meet people. Josiah nodded and did not say anything more about this. He changed into a rather interested expression and looked at the entrance of the encampment in the night. Tang, can David and the others pass smoothly? Tang Yin and the others were now waiting for the members of the gray space. After training overnight last night, Tang announced a mission for them to break through the encampment's defense early in the morning. If the guards were alerted midway, it would be considered a failure. It's hard to say, but there are definitely some who can pass, Tang answered casually, then shrugged and wondered, "Didn't we agree to meet at 6? Why are you here so early?" "It's nothing." "Well, actually, I'm too excited to sleep." Josiah stuck out his tongue and said excitedly, "The big character poster plan has finally been implemented. I've been thinking about it all night." Since Tang didn't want to be a hero, the big character poster plan naturally fell on Josiah's head. This was also the reason why Luo Sha had promoted her position in the publicity department. With such expectations on his back, Josiah was naturally nervous and excited. As such, it was not surprising that he had insomnia. "Don't worry, Commander. I believe that this plan will succeed," Collins said confidently. "Well, I hope so." This was a matter of great importance. Josiah, who had always been firm, was also a little worried. Then he pulled himself together and said, "Brother Colin, didn't I say that you can just call me Josiah?" Colin was stunned. Then he spread his hands and said, "Okay, Josiah." Tang nodded and said, "Well said. Josiah, you're too nervous. Relax." Well, when have my ideas ever failed? Although he knew that Tang was just comforting him, Josiah still felt relieved and smiled. Shameless. It was the same comfort, but the effect of the two was very different. Colin's face turned gray, and he sighed slightly, but then he recovered his smile. Tang's habit of observing people's expressions had been deeply ingrained in his bones. Seeing this, he curled his lips and secretly sighed at the power of beautiful women. As they chatted, the people in the publicity department also secretly glanced at Tang. Now, his nickname of the Devil had spread like wildfire in the base, and the people of the Gray Coat Army looked at him strangely. After a short contact, these people found that Tang was quite easy to get along with, but the brand on his chest was a little scary. After about 10 minutes, Michaud flashed out from behind like a ghost, called out to his boss, and then stood behind Tang. There was no doubt that among this group of new and old members of the Gray Space, Michaud's hiding skills were the best, and he was also the first to arrive here. After a while, some new and old members appeared one after another. At the same time, there were riots in the north and south of the base. Obviously, some of the members were caught. Tang furrowed his brows. He was undoubtedly dissatisfied with such an outcome. This operation was unknown to the sentries, so the success rate was undoubtedly higher. But even so, some people still failed. Half an hour later, the sky was still dark, and no one came at this time. Tang glanced behind him, and his face became even darker. So far, a total of 31 people had arrived, and 12 of them were old members. In other words, 10 people had been found. This result shocked the people in the publicity department, who were standing on the side. Was the defense of the base so weak? In such a short time, more than 30 people had sneaked in. Of course, to Tang, this was undoubtedly a humiliation. He now wondered if the training these past few days had been in vain. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows and was surprised to find that David was also not here. After all, he was the only one out of all the senior members who was not here. David broke in from the south. Michaud instantly understood Tang's idea. He stepped forward and whispered, "It seems that Brother Fry is guarding there today." Tang opened his mouth, but he was speechless. In this way, it made sense. Frey's strength was at the peak of the intermediate level, and his old brothers and the well-trained spear-breaking formation team were a disaster for David. You go and pick up the people later. All the backpacks that failed to pass will be increased by 10 kilograms. Tang's face was indifferent, and he continued, "Also, remind the camp guard to fix the loophole in the defense this time." Although there were objective reasons, a failure was a failure, and a necessary punishment was still necessary. This was not enough. The people in the publicity department looked at each other, a little confused. "Yes, sir," Michaud answered. Tang nodded, turned to Josiah and the others, and said, Let's go now." This time the big character poster plan was only a pilot project, and the target was an unknown village 10 miles away from here. Everyone was excited at this time, and even their speed was a lot faster. When they arrived at the periphery of the village, there was a glimmer of light in the sky. In this season, the people in the village were naturally not awake. Occasionally, the cries of fowls could be heard, adding to the tranquility of this place. "Wait a moment," Tang En said, and flew into the village. There were only about 100 families here, and the scale was not large. After taking a stroll, Tang En quietly pinched a dozen watchdogs until they fainted. This time, he came with Josiah because of Los's arrangement. His main task was to clear the obstacles and ensure the safety of the people. After Tang En was done, Josiah and the others quietly entered. They spread out the roll of paper, chose the wall, and pasted it. A few minutes later, everyone quickly left, leaving a dozen pieces of paper stuck on the flat wall. Huff, huff. Josiah's little face was red, and he only dared to breathe when he was outside the village. Tang En was surprised. "What's wrong?" It was only a few minutes, and he only pasted some paper. Why did Josiah look more tired than when he ran 10 miles? After a little calming down, Josiah bit his lip and said, "Tang, why do I feel like we are thieves?" Tang En didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and said, "Why do you think so? We didn't steal anything. It just feels weird. Josiah and the others were just experimenting this time, so they needed to secretly paste the paper to observe the real reaction of the civilians. If possible, they naturally didn't need to be so wretched in the future." After all this was done, the next step was to wait. However, Josiah and the others didn't stay idle. They changed into hunter outfits and other things that they had prepared in advance to observe the reaction. Naturally, they had to sneak in. Tang En was an expert in this, and he had already guided the few people who wanted to go in before they came. Besides, they didn't ask for a perfect disguise as long as they could dress up as hunters passing by or civilians in the next village. No matter which world it was, civilians or the people at the bottom of society were the most hard-working group. Soon, a peasant woman who got up early to fetch water opened the door and found the poster on the wall of her house after a few steps. From the shape of her mouth, it was obvious that she was surprised. When she turned her head and looked around, she found that more than a dozen families around her were the same. The peasant woman immediately turned around and went into the house. After a while, she came out with a man in his prime. Gradually, the village began to become lively. Every family opened their door and looked at the poster on the wall of their own house or another house in a daze. They were whispering to each other and discussing. A few busybodies kept running around, wanted to finish reading all the posters. "Okay, let's go in." Tang En took the lead and walked out of the hiding place. He walked toward the entrance of the village, and Josiah and a few others who were dressed up followed closely behind. If it were normal times, outsiders like them would naturally receive attention. The isolated small mountain village was very interested in any fresh faces. However, almost everyone's attention was on the wallpaper, so Tang En and the others who went in separately didn't receive much attention. This time, the poster had text and cartoons. It was obvious that more people gathered in front of the cartoons. "Hey, who put this up? Maybe it's a child's prank. I think it's old Parker's butt face. What does this mean? You don't understand? Isn't it very clear? TSK, TSK. That fat guy really looks like our masterby." "Huh, you don't say. They really do look alike." The fat guy was the image of an aristocrat. It wasn't ugly, and most aristocrats were like that. Aristocrats had their own fiefs, which were a major source of their economy. There was no doubt that Masterby was the owner of this village. From the looks of it, Masterby naturally wasn't a big aristocrat. In fact, it was very likely that he was a lord or a knight without a title. After mocking the aristocrats, the commoners also understood the meaning of this simple drawing. Aren't we the ones with yellow faces and muscles? These damn greedy old masters. That's right, sucking our flesh and blood to fill their big bellies. It looks like a toad. Child, go away. Did you hear that we have to hand in more flour this month? They're simply not giving us a way to survive. As if a string in the bottom of their hearts had been touched, the villagers gathered in front of the drawing paper, all of them agitated. The naughty child who was pushed out had a look of anger on his face. Then he rolled his eyes and ran a few steps to pick up a small yellow stone from the ground. Then, he turned around and squeezed into the crowd. Under everyone's gaze, the child raised a stone and wrote the word "bye" in a crooked manner on the aristocrat's big belly. Ah, ah. The villagers laughed even more happily. All the hatred they had gathered in the past turned into unscrupulous ridicule. The child was encouraged and became even more energetic. He immediately ran to another wallpaper and repeated his actions. Naturally, wherever he went, there would be roars of laughter. Tang Yin and Josiah looked at each other and smiled. Then, they followed the flow of people and looked at the drawing paper one by one. The last one was pasted on the west side of the village. It wasn't a drawing, but densely packed small words. Who knows how to read? Where's the old village chief? Invite the old village chief here. At this moment, the villagers' interest was completely piqued. They knew that the person written on the paper was probably the person who had pasted the drawing. After a while, an old man with a white beard was helped out. Everyone consciously made way for him. People would always feel reverence or admiration for things they didn't know. Therefore, everyone was very respectful to the old village chief, who was the most literate in the village. The old man looked up and down. Perhaps his eyesight was blurred due to old age, so he was slower. Although everyone had an anxious look on their faces, they did not rush him. Finally, cough, cough, this was written by the Gray Coat Army. The old man said, the owner of the wallpaper. The Gray Coat Army? No wonder my Uncle Annie's child joined the Gray Coat Army. I heard that this is a team that thinks for us. I've heard of it too. All right, be quiet and wait for the old village chief to finish reading. The brand officials naturally wouldn't come here to advertise that the Gray Coat Army was a mob of bandits. Therefore, the people here had a good impression of the Gray Coat Army. My name is Bar. I used to live in Wildstone Village. However, the village is no longer there. I'm the only one who survived. A few years ago, the old master's child rode a horse and trampled my neighbor, Old Paul's granddaughter, to death. Old Paul broke the horse's leg. That night, the old master's soldiers came. Without waiting for the details, they sealed off the village and started a massacre. The poster wasn't a slogan. It was the true story of a young man named Bar. This was an idea that Rosa came up with after being inspired by Tang Yin. For the illiterate people, slogans were empty. There was nothing more shocking than a true tragic story. In the Gray Coat Army, there were many similar stories as the old man slowly recited. The villagers seemed to see the village burn to ashes, the poor people who died tragically, and a young man who was lucky enough to escape alive. He looked up to the sky and swore that he would kill the old master one day. I can swear to the God of Light that what I said is true. The address of the ruins of Wildstone Village is Gray Coat Army Soldier Bar. Yes, that's all I wrote. After a short silence, the wind and thunder gathered. Kill that damned bastard. Kill all those greedy old masters. Support the Gray Coat Army. All kinds of loud curses were instantly heard. Then, the sound became louder and louder, echoing in the village. Anger was just an emotion. When released, it would become a kind of power. No one knew how long the villagers' anger would last. Perhaps they would slowly forget about it after a few days. Perhaps they would obediently hand over the increasingly harsh taxes. However, as long as the seed was planted, it would eventually pierce through the thick earth and sprout new green sprouts. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 251. In fact, many people would not think of the results when they did something. It was like an inconspicuous spark in the grassland, or like a butterfly inadvertently spreading its wings. They would not know the momentum of the prairie fire and the turbulent storm in the distance. After Rosa heard the results of the pilot implementation of the big character poster plan, she immediately decided to spread the net on a large scale. The publicity department, the combat department, the scout team, and all the other departments were activated. The villages and towns within a radius of more than 100 kilometers were marked on the map immediately. Then, groups of people and big character posters quickly spread out in all directions like the light of the rising sun. Vivid cartoons, real and tragic stories, simple and powerful ideas of the Gray Coat Army. Like nuclear fission, it set off waves in the hearts of thousands of poor people. Of course, such a response was due to the unyielding resistance of the Gray Coat Army for more than 10 years. These good impressions that had been made in the past were now beginning to accumulate. All of this was carried out quietly. The aristocrats who were domineering in the city did not know that a vigorous movement was gathering strength. Publicity was only the first step of the big character poster plan. The next step was for the members of the Gray Coat Army to reap the results, or the villagers who wanted to join the Gray Coat Army, or the bags of food that they supported. The strength of the Gray Coat Army was expanding at an unprecedented speed. The small oath-taking meetings that would be held by any member in the past were now changed to one every 3 days, then one every 5 days, and one every week. Everything had two sides, just like everything had its pros and cons. The people who kept joining, in addition to increasing the strength of the Gray Coat Army, also brought some management difficulties. The area of the base expanded again and again, and a large number of veterans began to take up the position of captain. The higher-ups of the Gray Coat Army began to feel happy and troubled. First, there were not enough armor and weapons, and then food would be a problem in the future. They originally thought that they could support them for a long time after extorting a large sum of money from the aristocrats, but now it seemed that it was far from enough. More than a month after the big character poster plan was implemented, Rosa held a meeting of the higher-ups in her house again. This time, in addition to the old ministers, Tang In, Josiah, and Board were also asked to join. Josiah and Board were selected because of their recent outstanding performance, especially Josiah. Even Bosco and the others thought that the big character poster plan was from her. Now that he had achieved such gratifying results, he was naturally qualified to have a seat here. It was somewhat unexpected for Tang to be sitting next to the group of old division heads. However, when they thought about the military exploits that he had made before, they felt that he was barely qualified. However, Tang was a bit bored right now. He came here purely because of Losha's request. Recently, he did not pay attention to the changes in the base. Instead, he focused all his attention on training the new members. Ahem, since everyone is here, let's begin. Rosa cleared his throat and looked at Bosco. He stood up and took out a piece of paper. In the past 1.5 months, more than 25,000 people joined the Gray Coat Army. They donated about 30,000 kilograms of food. Whoosh! Hearing this, everyone's spirits were lifted and their faces lit up with joy. Tang also raised his eyebrows. He knew that the Gray Coat Army had been expanding rapidly recently, but he did not expect such amazing results. Josiah's contribution to achieve such results cannot be ignored, so please allow me to express my gratitude. After that, Bosco bowed and saluted Josiah. Josiah was shocked. His little face suddenly turned red. He hurriedly got up and bowed back. Minister Bosco, you're too kind. As he stuttered, Josiah could not help but look at Tang with shame. She naturally knew who came up with the big character poster plan, but whether it was Tang In or Losha, they had both told her that this plan should be recorded under her name. Tang took the lead and applauded. He smiled and said, Josiah, don't be too humble. This is your contribution. Clap, clap, clap. The people around smiled and applauded. They did not know the inside story, so they all had an encouraging look on their faces. Josiah was stunned. Then he pursed his lips and bowed to the people around him. Did she not know that Losha wanted to support her to be a hero? Tang looked at Losha in confusion. The latter touched her forehead. Recently, she had been so busy that she had forgotten to communicate with Josiah about this matter. After the applause stopped, Bosco said, but because so many people have joined, the logistics of the station has issued a warning. If this continues, we will fall into a food crisis in a month. That's right. Losha nodded. This is also the reason why I called everyone here. I hope to find a way to solve this problem. Tang suddenly understood. It seemed that Losha invited him here to ask him for a good idea. With a wry smile, Tang Yin could not help but shake his head. He knew his own situation best. It was really a waste to ask him for this kind of problem. The people who joined later were not only soldiers, but also mouths. If this problem could not be solved properly, it would indeed affect the morale. The income of the Gray Coat Army mainly depended on donations from the people. In the past, when there were not many people, they could barely maintain a balance. Now, with the sudden addition of 25,000 people, this balance was immediately broken. It could be said that if it were not for the recent profits, the Gray Coat Army would have fallen into a famine. The problem had been put on the table, and the relaxed atmosphere at the beginning was swept away. Everyone was thinking hard. Occasionally, they would come up with ideas, but either because they did not solve a root cause or because they were not practical, they were quickly rejected in the discussion. Tang Yin secretly yawned. He had given up early on. This was not a problem that he could solve. He looked around and focused on Zhuo Fan in the corner. The latter still looked like he did not exist. His eyes were closed, and he was holding his sword. It seemed like he was in a state of rest. Was this a Void Realm warrior? Sure enough, he had the demeanor of a master. Tang Yin was bored. As if he felt the gaze, Zhuo Fan suddenly opened his eyes and looked at Tang Yin. He nodded lightly and then closed his eyes again. Tang Yin was stunned and touched his nose. His senses were really sensitive. At this moment, a clear voice said, "I have an idea." Tang Yin turned his head in surprise and saw Borg standing up from his seat and bowing. "Oh, let's hear it," Losha asked with interest. "My idea is to build a fixed production area behind the camp," Borg said confidently. "We have already stored a considerable amount of power, and we will be even stronger in the future. So, why don't we build an impregnable defense and make this the headquarters of the Gray Coat Army? As long as we can defend this place, we will be able to free up our hands to do production and be self-sufficient." Borg's idea was undoubtedly feasible. This model was similar to how nobles had their own manors and farms for production. Previously, the Gray Coat Army was not strong enough. They were constantly being hunted down and could not gain a foothold. Now that they had the big character plan, their strength would undoubtedly develop very quickly. In this way, it was necessary to build a base. However, did Borg really come up with this idea? Tang Yin had his doubts. Through their previous interactions, Tang Yin knew that Borg was very smart and was especially good at battle tactics. However, he was a complete amateur when it came to logistics and internal affairs. Borg's idea is good. Yes, now we can indeed consider building our own territory. The eyes of a few old department heads lit up, and they all spoke up to support Borg's idea. But planting crops takes time, at least a few months. What should we do about the current problem? At this moment, an old department head raised a question. Everyone was stunned and then nodded. Yes, this idea was good, but it would take too long to take effect. Distant water could not quench the present thirst. However, Borg said confidently, "I have also considered this. Recently, the Brand is at war with the Northern Wilderness tribes. The military supplies are all transported from the cities behind. I suggest we start from there." "You're saying that we rob them?" Borg shook his head slightly and smiled. "No, it's those bandits who robbed them. It has nothing to do with the Gray Coat Army." Looking at Borg's ambiguous smile, everyone came back to their senses and understood his intention. Borg's idea was very simple. He wanted the Gray Coat Army to disguise themselves as bandits and rob them. Anyway, there were many bandits in the Northern Wilderness. The Brand officials would not suspect them for a while. "Good. I think this idea is good. After chasing us for so many years, it's time for them to pay a price." Old General Omeng nodded and laughed. At this moment, Tang Yin noticed Bosco, who was smiling at the corner of his mouth. Yes, such a watertight idea should be thought of by him. Now, he was just using Borg to say it. The reason was also very simple. Just like how the big character plan was put under Josiah's name, it was to increase his reputation and achievements. "Very good, Borg, that's a good idea." Rosa nodded happily. She did not expect the problem to be solved so quickly. Borg was praised, and he could not help but feel proud. However, he was not a stupid person. He quickly bowed and thanked everyone for their encouragement. The atmosphere in the wooden house became relaxed again. The old ministers looked at Josiah and bored with admiration. These two had indeed performed well recently. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. Rosa was stunned. She had already told the guards outside not to let outsiders disturb the meeting today. "Come in." A young man in gray pushed the door open and walked in. He bowed and said, "Leader, ministers, and officers, I have an urgent report." Tang raised his eyebrows. "Isn't this Colin from the publicity department?" "Yes, go ahead. When we went to a village today to continue the promotion, we found that a few villagers who had donated food to us were seriously injured." "What? Damn it, who did it?" Everyone was furious. Most of the people in the Gray Coat Army were civilians. Moreover, the people who had been beaten were those who had donated food. It was obvious that the Gray Coat Army was the target. If this matter was not handled well, it would cause fear in the people and affect the big character poster plan. Colin continued, "It's the owner of this land, a knight named Claude." Rosa's face was gloomy. She nodded and said, "Got it. You can leave first." After Colin closed the door, Rosa glanced around and said, "How do you think we should deal with this?" "Of course we should kill him." The hot-tempered old general, Meng, immediately said, "I'll send a group of people now to flatten his manor. I don't mind if we kill him." An old minister frowned and said, "But won't the consequences attract some attention? This matter could be said to have happened at a very bad time." Now the big character poster plan was in full swing. If the killing of this knight attracted the attention of the brand officials, it would be hard to say what the consequences would be. It could be said that the Gray Coat Army was now in a dilemma. If they did not kill him, it would chill the hearts of the people. It might also have a bad impact on the big character poster plan. If they killed him, the consequences would be unpredictable. They might even be hunted down. The situation was very obvious. Now it was up to the higher-ups to decide. Suddenly, Rosa, who had been thinking and watching the discussion, let out a long sigh and said firmly, "Kill." Rosa wanted to use this to establish her authority. She would not allow anything to stop the big character poster plan. Rosa was the supreme leader of the Gray Coat Army. She had the final decision-making power. However, she was not a dictator. Her usual decisions were made after discussion with the others. Of course, this did not mean that she did not have the ability to make decisions. Once she made up her mind, Rosa could be said to be swift and decisive. "Okay, Old General Meng slammed his palm and was about to give the order. "Wait." At this moment, Tang suddenly stood up. He first apologized to Old General Meng, then said calmly, "Leader, how about leaving this mission to the gray space?" Recently, Tang had been worried about how to bring the new members to experience actual combat. After all, no matter how much training they still had to kill people in the end. Now that there was such an opportunity, of course, he would not miss it. Rosa looked at Tang Yin, who took the initiative to ask for the battle, and instantly understood his intentions. She nodded and said, "Okay, but this time we have to kill thoroughly and wipe out the entire manor." "Leader, don't worry, I'm a professional." To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 252. Night. This was a rather romantic word. It could be seen from the many operas and novels in the other world where a knight single-handedly saved a noble lady. Of course, this was also a word related to loyalty, glory, faith, courage, and so on. This could be heard from the slogans of the knights when they went to battle, to fight for glory, even at the expense of sacrifice. The status of a knight was not inherited. They needed to serve in the army or under the Lord. After repeatedly performing meritorious deeds, they could be rewarded with the title of a knight and receive a fixed piece of land. To be able to become a knight meant that they had officially stepped into the noble class. Of course, it was at the lowest level, but the lowest level of nobility was still a noble. After a knight had the support of a land, they would generally live a comfortable life. Knight Claude felt that he was living a good life. He used to serve under Lord Solomon. Ever since he injured his right leg in a battle, he retired. Lord Solomon treated him quite well, and gave him the title of a knight. Although he could not be compared to those nobles with family titles, in this land, Claude was undoubtedly a real king. Claude was not only greedy as a noble, he was also unusually lecherous. Of course, he called this flirtatious. What he regretted the most was not being born in a good era, because before the Brand Kingdom, it was a time of chaos between the various countries and the nobles. At that time, the nobles' etiquette was not as formal as it was now. It was even absurd. For example, the nobles had the right to the first night of all the women in the land who had just come of age. Now that the Brand Kingdom was unified, this absurd right was naturally abolished. But even so, Claude was not idle. The so-called system was for people to take advantage of loopholes. If you don't let me have the right to the first night, you can't stop me from getting married, right? So now Claude had 24 wives. Oh no, to be precise, he had 24 wives. Because tonight he was going to get married again, and the woman was a village girl he had set his eyes on. In order to get this pretty village girl, Claude put in a lot of effort, but the stubborn old man always refused. Claude had always prided himself on being a flirtatious man, so he did not use force at first. Of course, his patience was not very good either. The two rejections finally annoyed him. When he went to the village this afternoon, he just happened to see the poster of the Grey Coat Army. Claude was overjoyed. This was great. He didn't even need to think of a reason. First, he interrogated them to find out who had donated the food. Then, he beat them up and made them confess that the villager's family had also donated something. After that, it was simple. They would kidnap him and bring him back for a proper interrogation. The attic was brightly lit with flowers and trees. Claude's manor was undoubtedly shabby compared to the nobles in the city. There were only a few attics in the main building. However, the entire area wasn't small. In fact, as long as he wanted to, he could encircle the walls and make it his manor. The extra area was mainly used to build a few large pools where he played with his wives in the summer. Claude walked out of the hall with a bottle of wine in his hand. He casually summoned a guard and said impatiently, "Go and rush him again. Why isn't Father Mine here yet?" "Yes, Sir Knight." The self-proclaimed romantic Claude was very particular about formalities. Every time he got married, he would invite the only priest in his fief to preside over the ceremony. Of course, a priest who was willing to do such a thing would not be a good person. He did not have a strong desire for beauty. What he liked was money. Every time Claude got married, he would be able to get a large bounty. Looking at the servants who were busy carrying dishes back and forth, and thinking about the various ecstasy tonight, Claude drank a mouthful of wine at the bright moon and sighed emotionally. Life is like this. What more can a man ask for? Just as Claude was about to wax poetic and was about to pretend to be cultured, outside the manor, a group of uninvited guests in black armor arrived without making a sound. "Boss, we've investigated clearly. There are about 100 guards here. Well, a priest just went in. They seem to be preparing for the wedding." The thin Michaud whispered. Tangin was stunned and then touched his chin. "So impatient? TSK, TSK, what a coincidence. We must drink a cup of wedding wine later." When they came, they had gone to the village to inquire about the situation. After the old man who had lost his granddaughter found out that they were the Grey Coat Army, he immediately cried and begged. "Here, listen." Tangin turned to the 20 or so new members behind him and said, "This is your first operation after joining the Gray Space. 5 people in a group. I will send the old members to be your captain. A friendly reminder, this is not training. If you mess it up, you will die." "Yes, boss," everyone replied in a low voice. Tangin looked at the members in front of him with bloodthirsty eyes and could not help but nod in satisfaction. They were not like David's group. They had trained for a long time and had overcome the psychological barrier of not daring to kill. "Brother Tangin, what about me? Who am I with?" Little Carol waved her sickle and asked anxiously. The corner of Tang-Un's mouth twitched. "Put down the sickle." "Well, you and me." "Oh, boss, are we going in now?" David licked his lips and seemed to be a little impatient. "Ugh, a little caring." Tang-In touched his forehead and said bitterly, "At least we have to wait until the knight says I am willing to rush in. Only then will it feel like a drama." The layout of the manor hall was soon completed. White candles, red carpet, bright flowers. The fast speed of the servants was entirely due to Claude's many marriages. In addition to the newly picked flowers, the red carpet, beautiful candlesticks, and so on had witnessed the first 24 weddings. At this time, Claude had changed his clothes and was wearing a slightly gorgeous black formal suit. This was his most presentable noble costume. He used it to attend banquets, weddings, funerals, and so on. But it was a little distressing that this dress probably could not accompany him for long, because his belly was getting bigger and bigger. Suddenly, the music started. Two sturdy maids, one on the left and one on the right, walked slowly from the red carpet with a delicate woman in their arms. The delicate woman's feet were almost suspended in the air, and she moved forward involuntarily. Clap, clap, clap. The surrounding guards and servants kept applauding. They did not have any bad feelings about getting married so many times. In fact, they were even a little happy because it meant that they could eat and drink again. Soon, the three people walked awkwardly in front of Claude. "Dear Jenny, we will soon be legal husband and wife. Are you happy?" Claude asked in a gentle voice. Bah! From her appearance, it could be seen that Jenny's personality should be graceful, but now she spat on Claude's face and struggled violently. "In your dreams." "Father, I don't want to be married to him." Father Mawen's eyelids drooped as if he did not hear it all. Claude wiped the spit on his face and was not angry. He had always been tolerant of women. "Dear Jenny, don't struggle. It doesn't matter who you marry. Besides, I'm a noble. I can guarantee you a lifetime of food and clothing. This is a blessing that many women can't even imagine." "I don't want to. Let me go. I don't want to." Jenny was quickly fixed by the two maids again. In the midst of the entanglement, everyone was watching the farce on the stage. No one noticed that two figures, one big and one small, walked in from the side door. "Brother Tang in, should we do it?" Little Carol hid the sickle behind her back. "No hurry." Tang in shook his head and said with interest, "I'm familiar with funerals, but I haven't seen weddings yet." Waving his hand, Claude impatiently turned his head and said, "Father, you can start." Father Mawen nodded and said, "Swear on the God of Light. Are you willing to form a marriage contract with this woman? Be loyal to her until the end of your life?" "I'm willing," Claude straightforwardly said. Father Mawen turned to Jenny and asked, "Are you willing to form a marriage contract with this man? Be loyal to him until the end of your life?" "I don't. Woo-woo." Jenny's mouth was immediately sealed, and then a maid pressed her head down, forcing her to nod. "TSK, TSK. Looks like there's nothing to see in this other world's wedding." Tang in was somewhat disappointed. He then walked out and opened his mouth. "Not willing." Tang in was speechless. "I haven't even shouted yet. Who the hell is stealing my line?" Bang! The door was split open by an axe. Immediately, a youth drenched in sweat rushed in. "She's not willing. This is—" Tang was stunned. At first, he thought it was David and the others, but who would have thought that a youth he didn't know would come in? From his clothes, he should be a villager. Was this a scene of a bride snatching? Too exciting. Jenny was even more excited when she saw this youth, and struggled to push the maid's hand away. "Ryan, how come you are here? Quickly leave." "Woo-woo." "Damn." Claude's expression instantly darkened as he loudly shouted, "Guards! Where are the guards outside? Are they fucking blind? Get him out of here." He shouted a few times, but there was no response. Outside the door, in the darkness, it was completely silent. Claude's heart sank, feeling that something was wrong. Even if it was a wedding, there would still be guards outside. This could only mean that something had happened. "Take out your weapons." Fortunately, there were still many guards in the hall. When they heard this, they all took out their swords and carefully looked around. "Who are you, Bang?" His voice had yet to fade when a guard flew over the crowd, crossing the passage and smashing a candlestick on the other side. Tang in calmly retracted his right foot and pulled little Carol onto the red carpet. "Are you from the Gray Coat Army?" Ryan tightly gripped the axe. "I just came back from hunting today. Jenny's grandfather told me." Tang in nodded in relief. This kid's luck was pretty good. David and the others were clearing out the guards at the periphery and cleared a path for him. "Who are you?" Claude was still some distance away. so he didn't hear Ryan mention the Gray Coat Army. Me? Tangen spread his hands and said confidently, "Isn't it obvious? That's right, we are here to steal the bride. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 253. Bowing to thank book friend Moondot for the tip. Yes, and book friend Old Immortal Little Rookie for the monthly vote. Civic Cat cupped its paws and thanked Carrot. The music had long stopped. Because of Tang on straightforward words, the hall fell into silence. Snatching a bride was an ancient custom. It was said that it was still popular in some places in the northern wilderness tribes. This was also what the Brand people despised. They thought that barbarians were barbarians and only knew how to use this barbaric method. Although Claude yearned for some ancient customs, this was definitely not one of them, especially when his bride was being snatched. "How dare you break into a noble's manor?" Claude's face was quite gloomy, but he didn't immediately make an impulsive move. After all, the quiet manor now looked really strange. The power of love is great. Tang In patted Ryan's shoulder, who was a little nervous, and then curled the corner of his mouth. "Don't stall for time. The people outside can't come in. They can't even protect themselves." The surrounding guards who were closing in stopped in their tracks. They were a little surprised and doubtful. With his thoughts exposed, Claude's face turned even uglier. "Who are you?" He couldn't be blamed for repeating his question. If it was a civilian rebellion, they wouldn't be able to annihilate all the guards outside without a sound. Tangen didn't answer. He just glanced at Claude with a faint smile. Suddenly, a guard who had been carefully approaching suddenly stepped forward and brandished his sword. A cold light flashed and slashed at Tangen's head. His timing was very good. Under Claude's cover, the steel sword was only a few inches away from Tang in an instant. Tangen didn't dodge. He just curled the corner of his mouth slightly, as if he didn't care. Of course, in the eyes of everyone, he was undoubtedly scared silly. "Be careful." Ryan was shocked, but at this time, he didn't have the ability to react in time except to warn. At this moment, clang, sparks flew, and a curved sickle suddenly appeared in the trajectory of the steel sword. Naturally, it was little Carol. Previously, she had just stood obediently beside Tang In, and no one had paid attention to her. However, such an inconspicuous little girl was now brandishing a sickle that was even larger than her body to block the steel saber. Little Carol's white and tender arm fell from the force. In terms of strength alone, she was no match for the adult guard, but because of the curve of the sickle, the steel knife was still knocked aside. Then, she turned around and drew a beautiful arc with her scythe. It was like the action of hitting a baseball in the modern world. The cold light was slanted upwards. The guard exerted too much force. Not only did he fail to retract his saber, his body also involuntarily leaned forward. His defenseless neck seemed to have been delivered to the saber. Blood gushed out, and his body was sent flying. Half of his head was still hanging on his neck, and he was thrown back at a 90-degree angle. The corner of Tang Un's mouth twitched. He grabbed little Carol's shoulder and took 2 steps to the side to avoid the spraying blood. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air as a chill rushed up their spines. Several maids screamed, their eyes rolled back, and they fainted on the ground. Little Carol's expression at this time was also stunned. She just wanted to wave her saber to protect Big Brother Tang In. The subsequent attack was a completely subconscious reaction, just like what she usually did during training. But now, she had easily killed a guard. Different from the revenge killings in the past, this kind of battle made little Carol a little nervous and a little dazed. But unlike the panicked actions of ordinary people at this time, she just held the long handle of the sickle tightly again and again. "Oh, what's that?" Tang In and the others were standing at the front door, so the body of the guard that flew straight out the door. But at this time, someone just happened to come in and swung his sword. Bang! The pitiful body of the guard suffered a second heavy blow, and his whole body was almost flattened. At the same time, the half-hanging head finally fell off and flew out. Whoosh! His servant subconsciously caught it. The head flew up again, and the servant stumbled back, knocking over a row of chairs. Claude slapped away the flying head with a gloomy face and looked at the door. At the front door and two side doors, a group of murderous black armor people filed in. Needless to say, the strange situation in the manor was caused by them. Ah! Two high-pitched screams sounded at the same time. Claude suddenly turned his head and saw a thin young man who had come here at some point. At this time, he was covering Jenny's retreat, and the two unconscious maids were on the ground. Claude swallowed and knew that today was not going to be kind. Is there any point in asking this? Tang said with a flat face. Remember, killing is killing. Even if you have an absolute advantage, don't do the childish act of watching others struggle in fear, because no one knows if they will explode. Obviously, Tang's last sentence was for the members of the gray space who had just come in. Actual combat was the best way to train, which was why he had dragged it out until now. He waved his hand casually. Then kill. The silent black armor members followed this order and immediately rushed forward. The hall was instantly filled with fighting. Other than the servants, there were only about 30 guards here. They did not have the advantage in numbers, and their strength was also inferior. Soon, the guards suffered heavy casualties. Claude snatched a sword from a guard's hand and felt bitter in his mouth. He was no longer the brave and good at fighting night. His body had been hollowed out by wine and women for a long time, and it was difficult for him to wield a sword. He was still thinking about the origin of this group of people. One must know that the nobles were the main building of the empire, so not many people dared to kill a noble for no reason, because that would bring about thunder of revenge. But now, uniform attire, careful deployment, just what kind of people did I offend? Claude quickly regained his composure, because a burly man was rushing towards him with a large sword in his hand. Roar! Claude tried his best to roar before the battle. Just like in the past, the red fighting energy covered the steel sword. In any case, Claude was a knight, so of course he had fighting energy. But 10 years ago, he was an advanced beginner warrior, and now he was a beginner warrior. The fighting energy did not bring much comfort to Claude because a strong man opposite him also bulged with a yellow light, and in terms of color, it was obviously darker than as the battle in the hall did not last long. After a few minutes, the members of the gray space began to clean up the battlefield. Tang pulled Michaud and told him to look carefully for the manor's warehouse. No matter how low a noble was, he was still a noble. There should still be some good things. Boss, what should we do? David scratched his head and walked over, pointing at the priest who was huddled in the corner. The God of Light was the only religion in the Brand Kingdom. The Temple of Light's churches could be found in almost every corner of the empire, so most of the people were believers from birth. The only difference was the strength of their faith. Now that everyone in the manor had been killed, and only the priest survived, this undoubtedly meant something. It had to be said that the Temple of Light maintained its external image very well. So even now, David and the others, who were numb to killing, did not lay their hands on the priest. Oh, I almost forgot about you. Tang narrowed his eyes, walked over, and forcibly pulled the priest up. I'm a priest of the Temple of Light. Don't kill me. Father Maven's face was pale as he said in a panic. He had just seen these people kill everyone in the hall, as if they were vegetables. Priests were low-level clergymen of the Temple of Light. After a period of training, they could be sent to work outside the Temple of Light. Their fighting strength was almost negligible. The only thing they could do was to use elementary healing. This was also to close the distance between them and the believers when preaching. Tang smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. I didn't say I was going to kill you." He turned his head and said to Jenny and Ryan, who were hugging each other, "You two come over." Jenny and Ryan looked at each other and slowly walked over with some confusion and fear. "Ryan, you like Jenny, right?" Tang suddenly asked. I. Ryan didn't expect Tang to ask this question. His face immediately turned red and he stammered. Tang stroked his chin and said, that should be the case. Otherwise, who would stupidly rush into a noble's manor with an axe to save someone? TSK. Jenny, do you like Ryan? Jenny shyly glanced at Ryan, lowered her head, and said softly, "I like him." Ryan opened his mouth and was hit by the sudden joy from the sky. He was speechless for a while. "Ha!" Tang In snapped his fingers and said, "You have a good taste. It's not easy to find a man who is willing to risk his life for you. This is love. What do you think, father?" Maven was stunned. Then he wiped the sweat on his forehead and said with a forced smile, "Yes, it's indeed a very sincere love." Tang In nodded with satisfaction and said, "In that case, would you please preside over their wedding?" Father Mawan, Jenny, and Ryan, as well as David and the others in the hall, were all stunned. What was going on? Although there was a priest here, the corpses all over the floor and the pungent smell of blood. "What? You don't want to?" "Well, I do. I do," Maven hurriedly said. "I do." Ryan suddenly came back to himself and said loudly, "Ha! It's useless for you to say yes to me." Tang In shrugged and stepped back with a smile. "Then, father, let's begin." Ahem. Maven forced himself to calm down and said the words that couldn't be more familiar to him. "Swear. Swear by the God of light. Do you want to marry this woman? Be loyal to her until the end of your life?" Ryan straightened his chest and said, "I do. Swear by the God of light. Do you want to marry this man? Be loyal to him until the end of your life?" Under Ryan's eager gaze, Jenny said in a low but firm voice, "I do." "Then, I hereby solemnly announce that under the gaze of the benevolent God of light, Ryan and Jenny are officially married." Clap, clap, clap. This is love. Everyone clap. Clap. David and the others raised their hands and clapped with strange expressions. This was definitely the weirdest wedding they had ever attended. "Haha, congratulations, Ryan." Tang In walked up. Ryan looked excited and suddenly bowed. Thank you. Thank you." There was no doubt that tonight was definitely a great surprise and joy for him. He had come here with the thought that he was going to die, but in the end, he married the woman of his dreams. "You're welcome. Well, take this as our gift." Tang In handed over a gold note with a face value of 100 gold coins. Last time, when he killed the leader of the Mountain Cat Bandits, he got 12,000 gold coins. Tang In didn't hand the money in, but used it as a special development fund for the gray space. Ryan was shocked and quickly waved his hands. "Oh, no, don't refuse it. It's a bit vulgar, but it's still a token of our sincerity." Tang In stuffed the gold note into Ryan's hands and shrugged. "If you want to thank me, can you lend me your axe?" "Well, okay." Ryan handed over the axe that he had been holding in his hands in a daze. "Thank you." Tang In took it and said gently, "Go back now. Well, if possible, please don't tell anyone about what happened tonight." "No problem. We'll keep it a secret." Ryan grabbed Jenny's hand and bowed to Tang In and the others again before leaving the hall. Waving goodbye, Tang In waved the axe and turned to the priest. "Okay, now you're the only one left. You said you wouldn't kill me. I'll keep it a secret. I swear to the God of light." Malin looked panicked. He felt that the situation was not right. "I said I won't kill you now." Tang In pursed his lips. "Also, I really don't trust the God of light." "Well, I don't have a good impression of you priests. I used to know a priest. I forgot his name. Well, let's call him a scumbag. I killed him. Later, I knew another one. He had a higher position, but he was even more of a scumbag. Phew, I really wanted to kill him with my axe, but I couldn't do it. So, I'm going to practice on you. I'm from the Temple of Light. You can't kill me." Mawan felt Tang Un's undisguised killing intent. He hurriedly retreated, fell to the ground, and crawled backward. Tang In stepped forward expressionlessly and waved his axe. A high-pitched scream was heard. "What are you shouting for? I haven't killed you yet." After a pause, Tang In frowned and looked back. Behind him, David and the others all had complicated expressions. Of course, they had absolute trust and loyalty towards Tang In, but seeing a priest being killed, they still felt a little uncomfortable. Some of them were even official believers. Their mouths squirmed as they tried to persuade him. Tang In thought for a while and squatted down. "Before I kill you, I'll listen to your unbearable history." "Well, don't tell me you don't have one." Red Light's left hand clapped, and blood energy poured in. After that, Tang In took a step back and stood quietly on the spot with his arms crossed. Of course, Tangan didn't believe that this priest would be any better than he was at Claude's wedding. Actually, doing this was a waste of time. But Tangan still decided to let David and the others see what a priest from the Temple of Light was like. His main purpose in forming the Gray Space Team was to gather everyone's strength to kill Sessman. To do that, he naturally had to get the members to break the light of faith in their hearts. The effect of the blood energy invading his body was naturally painful. Unlike Fry, Maiwen wasn't a tough guy who could resist it with his willpower. Therefore, not long after, he was rolling on the ground, explaining how he had collected Claude's bounty, how he had taken the money donated by the believers, and how he had shared the women Claude had sent to him. He explained all the dirty things clearly. On the side, the expressions of David and the others kept changing. Surprise, disdain, anger, killing intent, boss, kill. Him. Luke couldn't help but say hatefully, one word at a time. He was a loyal believer of the Temple of Light, but he really didn't want these words to pollute his ears. Kill him. Kill him. Tangan nodded inwardly. Now that he had achieved his goal, he waved his axe without hesitation. Thud, thud, thud. Help. Tangan didn't slowly torture the other party to death like little Carol had, but he didn't mind letting this scumbag experience more pain. Not long after, Tang-In and the others exited the manor, leaving behind a sea of raging flames. If you like this work, you're welcome to vote for it at Chidian. Come. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 254. There was nothing that could not be done, only creativity that could not be thought of. Therefore, there was no doubt that as long as a suitable method was found, goods that no one cared about could sell like hotcakes, and teams that were on the verge of extinction could be revived. The Greycoat Army had persisted in fighting for so many years. Although they had gone through many trials and tribulations, within a certain range, they had indeed laid a solid foundation for the masses. Therefore, after the big character poster plan, the momentum of development was like the floodgates had been opened, and the floodwaters flowed for thousands of miles, unstoppable. In just over a month, all the villages and towns within a radius of 100 miles were covered. The response of the people was also very strong. It could be said that the Greycoat Army had embarked on the right track of rapid development. Of course, development was not always smooth sailing. At the same time that the big character posters were posted everywhere, it also caused a strong backlash from the Knights of the Fiefdom. No one was willing to let other forces wantonly recruit people in their own territory or take away food supplies and so on. Therefore, after these knights discovered the big character posters, they all used high-handed methods. Unfortunately, they did not realize the seriousness of the problem. They only knew how to severely suppress the active people and did not think of solving the problem at the source. Therefore, the result was that their manors were all turned into ruins overnight. No one knew exactly who did it. The people only knew that when they woke up the next day, they saw black smoke curling up from the address of the fiefdom's owner. They instantly entered a state of no oppression and exploitation, running around to spread the news, singing and dancing. The manors were destroyed one after another, causing the remaining nobles to tremble in fear. They looked around blankly, but could not find where the elusive enemies were. The Greycoat Army was naturally the main suspect, but the key was that they had never done such a crazy thing before. In addition, the nobles knew that the Greycoat Army had just been encircled and wiped out, and their vitality was greatly damaged. Logically speaking, they should be recuperating somewhere at this time. At this moment, another shocking news came. A group of supplies that were being transported to the front lines had been robbed by a group of bandits. While the nobles were cursing these bandits who did not know how to write the word death, they suddenly connected the dots with the recent events. One had to know that the manors that were destroyed had obvious traces of looting. Although bandits rarely killed nobles before, they now even dared to touch military supplies. Robbing a noble's manor should be something that they did in passing. The more the nobles thought about it, the more they felt that it was possible, so they reported their analysis to their respective lords. The 4 feudal lords had the duty to protect the nobles in their territories. Furthermore, The Imperial military had issued a notice, so a grand bandit cleanup operation had officially begun. Of course, he was also looking for the missing Gray Coat Army. The bandits were innocently struck by this unexpected calamity and suffered heavy casualties. However, they had been dealing with the Empire for many years and naturally had a set of life-saving methods. Therefore, after the initial panic, each of them used their own methods to dodge. As for the Gray Coat Army, outsiders did not know about the killing of the nobles, but some of them naturally knew about it. All of this was done by the Gray Space Team, led by Tangan. Ever since they had completely destroyed Claude's Manor, they had been constantly attacking and killing every Lord of Knights that showed up. Such efficiency was naturally shocking. After old General Omeng learned of this matter, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. The Gray Space Team was amazing. One had to know that he was the one who initiated the violent counterattack in the beginning. If he had been the one to do it, he would have naturally sent an officer to lead a group of people to forcefully flatten the city. Although this would also solve the problem, it would also expose their whereabouts very quickly. On the other hand, the Gray Space Team had obtained information, quickly collected relevant information, formulated battle strategies, carried out night attacks, and eliminated traces. It was a completely streamlined operation. Not only were they professional, but they were also professional. It was really amazing. People like Bosco had mixed feelings when they heard about this. Therefore, very soon, the petty actions against Tang, Un, and the others in the base had all disappeared. Of course, Tang In and the others were so arrogant because they were approved by the higher-ups of the Gray Coat Army. Although they knew that they would be exposed sooner or later, Luo Sha and the others were not willing to stop now. The reason was simple. It was that Tang In and the others kept bringing back the private belongings of the nobles. Every once in a while, the nobles would hand over taxes and supplies to their respective lords. However, that was only a small part of it. The greedy nobles would take back many times the amount from the commoners. Therefore, each of their warehouses was full. In addition, almost all of the nobles had a hobby of keeping good things in secret rooms. Although Tang Un and the others were assassins, they knew a little about things like picking locks and sneaking in. Therefore, every time they set out, they would come back with a lot of money. The Gray Coat Army naturally had no use for those jewels. However, as long as they changed hands, they would become real gold coins that could be used to buy food, armor, and other things. This operation continued for a total of 15 days in the gray space, and the result was that they had looted more than 20 manors. If it weren't for the fact that the Lord's soldiers had started to encircle and suppress the bandits, they would have wiped out all the small nobles within 100 miles in one fell swoop. In the afternoon, at the top of the canyon, "Boss, we can't do this business anymore." David carefully poked half of his head out from behind the boulder and quickly lowered it again. Tang touched his chin and sighed. The world is not peaceful. They had originally come out to find a lord, but not long after they left the base, they ran into these fully armed Lord soldiers in front of them. The members of the Gray Space curled their lips and disagreed with Tang In's words. After all, it was because of them that the world had not been peaceful recently. "Let's retreat, boss," Michaud said softly. With these densely packed soldiers in front of them, there was no way they could pass. "Okay." Tang In nodded and then asked, "Are you ready?" "No problem." Harry made a wretched gesture. David, who was looking outside, suddenly said, "Oh, the scouts are coming. What a pity." They were currently at the top of the canyon on the right side of the mountain road. In this dangerous terrain, as long as the general was not careless, he would definitely send people to search for them. Tang In shook his head. "Not everyone is stupid. Luke, watch boss." Luke raised a black longbow covered in patterns and aimed at the scouts who were climbing the mountain. This bow was the Flying Eagle bow, the spoils of war that Tang and had obtained from killing Goshawk. Luke was the most talented archer in the Gray Space Team, so Tang and gave him the bow. Luke's current ability was naturally not as strong as Goshawk's, but it was no problem for him to deal with a target that only had a range of 200 meters. Whoosh, the bowstring vibrated, and a sharp arrow whistled through the air. By the time the scout who was climbing the mountain realized what was going on, the arrow was already in front of him. Bang! Blood bloomed, as the arrow pierced through the scout's chest and rolled down with his body. "Haha, well done." David laughed and punched Luke's shoulder. Whoosh! Luke's hand shook, and the second arrow missed its mark. F***CK. Luke glared at David gloomily. It was obvious that David's actions had affected him. "Well, I'm training your ability to resist interference. The battlefield is never the same. Young man, you still have to practice." David scratched his head and laughed shamelessly. Whoosh! The scouts below were suddenly attacked and immediately blew a sharp warning. Whoosh! Bang! The whistle stopped abruptly, and the scout who had sounded the warning was also shot and rolled down the hill. "Ah, as expected, a good bow." Laughing, Luke retracted his arm and stroked the bow as if he were stroking silk. Goshawk had really made a name for himself with this bow, so the Flying Eagle bow couldn't be any worse. The remaining scouts had already found cover. Luke didn't have the domineering strength of Goshawk to shoot through rocks, so he didn't continue attacking. At that moment, the Lord's soldiers in the distance had already received the warning. They quickly spread out and surrounded the hill. "Let's go." Tang Yin nodded and walked to the rope behind the hill. Needless to say, this was the gray space's unique escape method: flying. Gliding, landing, rolling, dozens of people quickly landed on a small mound on the opposite side. Then, the muscles on David's arms bulged, and he roared as he pulled the rope and the tree trunk over. Since they couldn't make a deal, Tang Yin and the others naturally had to retreat. But these soldiers were heading in the direction of the base. Although the gray coat army soldiers behind them would also guide them, Tang Yin took over the matter first, because there was a bandit stronghold not far from him. Since they had nothing to do, they might as well give these bandits and soldiers some entertainment. Soon, Tang Yin and the others found a new position and watched as the bandit stronghold was quickly destroyed by the Lord's soldiers, who then went on a killing spree. "Tsk, we wasted so much effort." Tang Yin patted the dust off his clothes in boredom and curled his lip. "Let's go." A bunch of trash with only 5 combat strength. Tang Yin and the others had done this kind of thing many times, so they didn't take it to heart at all. When they returned to the rear, they told an officer what had happened and had him pay attention to the movements of the soldiers. Then they walked to the base. The current base was no longer a simple wooden fence house. Board suggestion had been adopted, so now large-scale construction projects could be seen almost everywhere. The Gray Coat Army had been in a state of being hunted for a long time. Because of this, most people had a desire to return home. Now, this desire was constantly being realized, so all the people were very enthusiastic. With the help of everyone's wisdom, the outer city walls were beginning to take shape. Ambition always grew with the growth of strength. After Lhasa and the others decided to build a base, they planned to build the Gray Coat Army's first city here. "Hey, Tang, you're back so soon. What did you get today?" Tang Yin turned his head and saw Lhasa walking toward him with a smile. Recently, because of the private stashes of the nobles, she had been counting money until her hands cramped. "Yes, I met the Lord's soldiers on the way," Tang Yin explained. "Oh." Lhasa's tone was slightly disappointed. Then, she raised her eyebrows and said, "It's good that you're back. I have something to talk to you about." Come with me for a walk." Tang Yin was stunned. Then he dismissed the gray space team and followed Lhasa slowly around the outer city walls. "Thank you, Tang." After walking for a while, Lhasa touched the stone foundation and sighed. "I thought it would take a lifetime to do this." The Gray Coat Army actually has its first city. Just thinking about it makes me feel like I'm dreaming. "Oh, I should apologize to you. That plan was yours. Now it's under Josiah's name." Tang Yin touched his nose and smiled bitterly. "Leader, if you have something to say, just say it." After spending some time together, Tang Yin had some understanding of Lhasa. This leader's personality was not only strong. On the contrary, she was the kind of person who had a strong purpose. Her methods could be tough or soft. Now that she was praising and apologizing, there must be something she needed help with. "You're very boring." Lhasa glared at Tang Yin angrily. "Okay." Tang Yin sighed and suddenly became interested. "Leader, after the city is built, what do you plan to name it?" Lhasa nodded satisfactorily and thought. I haven't thought of a name. Well, how about Dawn City? How old-fashioned. Tang and touched his nose and flattered. Well, not bad, not bad. It's concise and meaningful. It's a good name. Lhasa did not look happy at all. Do you know? I've observed you before. Whenever you feel awkward or want to lie, you touch your nose. Tangen's hand that was touching his nose again froze. To be honest, he was a little surprised. He had not met Lhasa many times, but she was able to accurately point out his little habits. Observant and insightful. She was indeed born to be a leader. I feel sorry for Josiah. Haha, forget it. I won't tease you anymore. After saying this out of the blue, Lhasa said seriously, I do have something that I need your help with. I knew it. Tang sighed and nodded. Leader, please tell me. Thanks to you, the Lord's soldiers have recently started to clear out the bandits on a large scale. Our big character poster plan has also been affected, so, after pausing for a while, Lhasa's eyes lit up. So I've discussed with a few department heads and decided to go to the city to advertise. Well, Josiah will be in charge of this matter. As for your gray space team, they will accompany and protect you. Okay, Tangen agreed. Have I finally reached this step? The population of the villages was limited. Now, everyone knew that the big character poster plan had more potential than this. If the advertising in the city was successful with the huge population base, the Gray Coat Army strength would be greatly enhanced. However, the difficulty of advertising in the city was also obvious. That was the core of the brand's nobles. They would definitely not allow the Gray Coat Army to get involved there. Moreover, that was the place where the government mainly advertised the Gray Coat Army as violent criminals. So, no matter how one looked at it, the future was filled with obstacles. It was yet another battle where the smoke of gunpowder couldn't be seen. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 255. Pitter patter patter. The gloomy weather for the past few days seemed to be like God's unhappy face. Finally, at this moment, the light rain fell like teardrops. The rugged mountain road, the muddy path. Damn, this damn weather. It's really not the right time. The loud man complained while wiping the raindrops off his face. Be content, David. If it was the day before yesterday, it would be terrible. A fat young man covered his forehead with his hand and tried to look into the distance. By you jinx! It was David and Harry who spoke. Behind them were the 3 new members who had come out to explore the way. There was no seniority in the gray space team. If it had to be based on rank, then the old members had more authority than the new members. David was undoubtedly the oldest, but Harry and the others had gone through life and death with him. Both sides had long blurred the boundary between ranks. It was normal for them to joke with each other. If it was the new members, they would have to call them Captain or something before speaking. The city's publicity plan had been launched. The publicity staff, led by Josiah, had set off the day before yesterday. But the base was really far from the target city. It would take about 3 days to walk. But just as they were about to arrive, they were unlucky enough to encounter rain. Okay, it's already happened. What's there to complain about? Harry answered casually. Then he looked at the simple hourglass in his arms. Well, it's time. Let's go back and report. As scouts, of course, they had to report the situation at the right time. You guys stay here first. David finished instructing the 3 new members and ran back with Harry. Not long after, they saw a group of people walking on the mountain road behind them. At the front of the group was a young man and woman who were chatting. Hey, David, you've been with the boss the longest, right? Harry rolled his eyes and suddenly asked. David rolled his eyes. Nonsense, when I was with the boss, you stop. Harry hurriedly made a temporary gesture and asked, Then do you know about the boss and Miss Josiah? Hee. Oh, you mean that? David understood what Harry meant. He imitated Tang and touched his chin. Well, I don't know. Your mother. Harry, who was full of expectation, almost vomited blood. He shouted angrily. Why are you still pretending if you don't know? How can you blame me? David said unhappily, It's not like you don't know the boss's character. If he doesn't say anything, what can you tell? In the past, I only probed a little and was immediately seen through. But I heard from Philip that Josiah probably likes boss. Oh, tell me, tell me. Harry immediately perked up and said anxiously, Philip is indeed very experienced. How'd he know? David stopped and thought for a moment. I don't remember clearly. F***CKU. Oh, I remember now. David said promptly. Philip said that Josiah is a very opinionated person, so it's easy for her to fall in love with those who are more knowledgeable than her. However, she was already outstanding among her peers, so if she continued like this, she would probably fall in love with an uncle, an old grandpa, or something like that. But she met Boss. Well, although Boss looks a little ordinary, all kinds of ideas are endless in his mind. Plus, his age is just right, so Joshua should like him. That's what Philip said. That makes sense. That makes sense. Harry slapped his thigh and said excitedly, Philip isn't an idiot. His analysis is so clear and logical. TSK, so it's a girl chasing a guy. It's definitely going to happen. What are you two whispering about? Come here. In the distance, Tangon's voice came from afar. They're coming. David and Harry hurriedly ran over. Ahem. Harry calmed himself down and said, Boss, there's nothing unusual ahead. We'll reach Riva City in a while. Riva City was the target that Tang In and the others chose this time. It was a medium-sized city in the north that was less than 100 years old. It used to be a town, but because of the discovery of many mineral veins around it, it gradually became a city with the help of merchants. There was a reason why they chose it as their target. The nobles attached great importance to mineral veins, and at the same time, they exploited them the most. There were a few riots in this city because of the mineral veins, so the people were very angry. This would undoubtedly make the Grey Coat Army's propaganda more effective. Tangan nodded and then frowned. David, what are you looking at? You have a weird expression. David was secretly looking at Tang, In, and Josiah, so he panicked when he heard the question. No, nothing. Harry was smart enough to know that David would be exposed if he continued like this. So he immediately said, Boss, we'll go back and explore first. Then he nudged David's leg. David understood and said the same thing. Go. Tangan looked at David in confusion and waved his hand. David and Harry were relieved. They avoided Tang and sharp gaze and ran away. Shaking his head, Tangan turned around and said, Josiah, don't think too much. The leader has her reasons for making you a hero. You just have to do it like you did before. But Josiah bit his lip and stuttered. It all started the night before they left. Rosa finally remembered that she wanted to talk to Josiah about the Grey Coat Army's hero. Josiah listened with interest at first and strongly agreed that such a hero should be created. But when she found out that she was the hero, her mind went blank. She didn't hear what Rosa said after that. I'm going to be the hero of the Grey Coat Army. What a joke. Before Joshua could refuse, he realized that Rosa had already left. What was worse was that she had subconsciously nodded her head before. She actually agreed just like that. After that, she didn't sleep well that night. Josiah thought a lot. Yes, she joined the Grey Coat Army to make her greatest contribution, but being a hero was not in her consideration at all. It wasn't that she didn't have confidence. It wasn't about confidence at all. Josiah sometimes fell into the childish illusion of a young girl, such as the Grey Coat Army growing stronger with her efforts, to the point where they could compete with the Brand Empire and then improve the status and living standards of the civilians and so on. But that was only an occasional thought. It could only be used as a future goal to motivate herself. In fact, in general, Josiah was a more pragmatic person. But now, Rosa suddenly asked her to be the hero of the Grey Coat Army. It was like a small village chief who was overburdened with managing the affairs of the village, suddenly being appointed to be the mayor of the city. Of course, there was a surprise, but more than that, there was an overwhelming fear. You have to believe in yourself. Tang In encouraged her. As a noble, You dare to lead the poor to march, abandon your noble status and superior life to join the Gray Coat Army. Encourage the people when you are being hunted, criticize the opponent strongly during negotiations. The Josiah. As Tangin continued to talk about her achievements, Josiah's expression began to gradually become firm. Josiah was a stubborn person who faced difficulties head-on. At this time, she was just frightened by the sudden title. Given time, she could walk out of it on her own, not to mention Tang's constant encouragement for the past 2 days. Well, then I'll try. Josiah pursed her lips, and her beautiful face was full of seriousness. Haha, that's right. Tangin laughed loudly, full of relief. Phew! Josiah let out a long breath, and her tone was a little complaining. Aunt Rosa is really too much. I was already a little nervous about the city's publicity plan, but she had to scare me at this time. Tang, you too. You don't want to be the hero, and you recommend me. Tangin touched his nose and said awkwardly, I'm not suitable. Excuses. You know more than me, and you're stronger than me. Josiah began to nag. Ahem. Yeah. Why haven't David and the others reported back yet? Did something happen? I have to go take a look. After muttering to himself, Tangin was about to rush forward. Boss, Tangin, who had just taken 2 steps, stopped and saw David and the others running towards him. We've arrived at Revis City. Damn it. I've just come up with a reason. Do you have to be so quick? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 256. In the afternoon, Tangin and the others officially entered Revis City. Every city had its own unique flavor, but Revis City felt like a brown bread that had been left out for a long time. The streets were made of gray stones that could never be washed clean by the light rain. The uneven walls seemed to be tainted by the dark air. There were also colorful molds growing in the corners of the walls that were hard to notice. A group of a few dozen people would attract a lot of attention. Therefore, as soon as they entered the city, Tangin and the others found out the location of the wood market. Then, they bought some ironwood needed for construction, changed into the clothes they had prepared, and became a small merchant group passing by. The city was different from the countryside. The promotion plan couldn't be completed in a day. Although Josiah and the others had some simple arrangements when they came, they still had to observe the situation before making a decision. Boss, what do you think about this one? Harry pointed at the hotel in front of them as they arrived at a slightly remote location. You're the leader of the merchant group now. After reminding him, Tangin roughly looked around and nodded. Okay, this will do. In the group, the chubby Harry was the one who looked the most like a businessman. Although Tangin could also pretend to be a businessman, it was better for him to act as himself. Oh, I forgot again. Harry scratched his head embarrassedly. Then, he straightened his face and raised his hand slightly. Little Wei, can you ask if you can book this hotel? Stop pretending. David glared at Harry, who was acting like a villain, and walked into the hotel. The hotel in the other world was actually a combination of a tavern and a hotel. Perhaps because of the bad location, the business of this hotel wasn't very good. There were only a few people in the lobby. No one greeted the guests when they came in. The boss was lying on the wine cabinet motionlessly, as if he was taking a nap. Boss, bang. Impatient, David slammed his palm on the counter. The boss screamed, and his round body almost fell off the bench. Damn it, you. Oh, welcome. It was no doubt annoying to be woken up from one's sleep. However, when the sloppy boss saw a large group of people, he immediately put on a happy expression. Do you want to eat or stay? Stay. We have more people. Can we book this place? Haha, yes, of course. The boss was overjoyed as he hurriedly shouted. The blessing of the god of light was a big deal. Boss. The waiter next to him pointed to the back and reminded him in a low voice. The boss was stunned, and then his face turned bitter. He rubbed his hands and said, I'm sorry. There are people staying here for a long time, but there's only one, and the remaining rooms are enough for you. Is that okay? Since they were doing business, There was no reason for them to chase their customers away. Therefore, after the boss finished speaking, he looked at David eagerly. David was slightly taken aback. He then turned to look at Harry, who was putting on airs behind him. Touching his chin, Harry seemed to be thinking, but his small eyes had already turned to the side. Tang In withdrew his gaze from the hall and nodded slightly. Of course, it would be best if he could cover it. That way, he could prevent unnecessary trouble. However, this did require a bit of luck. It was already late, and there was only one person at the back. This was already a pretty good situation. These are just some thoughts. Tang In's attention was now on the two diners in the corner of the hall. Although their movements were normal, Tang In's eyes were very sharp. He could tell at a glance that these two people were warriors, and they looked a little familiar. Well, he hoped that they were just passing by. David had already discussed the room fee with the boss and told him not to let any guests stay. The boss naturally agreed. His hotel business was already very bleak. It was good enough to have one person stay in a day. Now that there was such a large group of people staying here, what was there to be dissatisfied about? Our goods are still outside. Boss, open the backyard. No problem, no problem. Why are you still standing here? Hurry up and move the things for the guests. The boss shouted to the two waiters beside him. David waved his hand. No need, we'll do it ourselves. Moving the goods was a pretense. Their real purpose was to observe the surrounding terrain and set up simple defenses. Oh, okay. As if changing his face, the boss put on a pleasant expression again. In his heart, however, he was muttering, booking the hotel and not letting anyone help move the things. Were the goods very valuable? Of course, this thought was fleeting. He was a businessman, not a gangster shop, so he naturally didn't have to care so much. Harry took the lead, and everyone filed through the hall. Behind them was a courtyard and 2 rows of connected lofts. Most of the members of the gray space lived on the first floor, at the entrance, and at the stairs. Tang In led Luke and the others up the Polonius stairs with Josiah and the others. Although the hotel was deserted, the environment was clean. When they reached the second floor, they couldn't help but be stumped, because an old man was sitting on a chair in the corridor with a newspaper in his hand. Seeing Tang In and the others come up, the old man turned his head and sized them up before he nodded kindly in greeting. He was probably the person who lived here. Nobody thought much of it. After greeting him, they each chose their own rooms. Tang In, who was walking at the back, frowned, and his eyes flashed as he led Josiah to the innermost room. This feeling couldn't be wrong. It was a colleague. The corridor wasn't spacious. The old man retracted his legs and turned his body slightly. As they passed each other, Tang In's ears suddenly twitched. He didn't stop and reached the end of the corridor with a calm expression. Pushing the door open and entering, Tang In first checked the room, then opened the window and looked out. He then made an alarm button. Okay, you can stay here. Don't open the window. Okay. Josiah nodded. Tang In opened the door and walked out. He turned around and said, "Rest early. You too. Good night." Josiah smiled and closed the door. Walking back, Tang In tossed the key and looked around for the room numbers. Not this one. Number 33, number 32. As he searched for the room, Tang In gradually approached the old man who was reading the newspaper. The latter glanced at him before retracting his gaze. Found it. Tang In looked at the door on the other side of the old man's room. He raised his eyebrows slightly and looked a little happy. When the old man saw this, he turned his body sideways again and let Tang In pass. Thank you. Is there any interesting news today? His tone was very normal, suitable for strangers to ask casually. The old man was slightly stunned, then he smiled and said, "It's all normal things. There's nothing interesting. Oh, if there's nothing interesting, then I won't read it." Rip! The middle of the newspaper suddenly shattered, and a hand stretched out in the shape of a claw. The attack was very sudden. The old man's body tensed up, and his pupils instantly dilated. Other than that, he couldn't do anything. Then he felt a chill on his neck, and his head drooped weakly. "Did I tell you that your disguise is terrible?" Tang In stepped forward and put the old man in a reclining position. The shattered newspaper casually covered the old man's face. After doing all this, Tang Yin first took a few steps forward, opened the door, and closed it. Then, he walked back and silently went to the room opposite the old man. He leaned his upper body forward, and the sound of people talking in the room could be heard faintly. Tang Yin touched his nose and opened his mouth in shock. No way. How did I meet someone like this? The atmosphere in the room was heavy. A middle-aged man with a sallow face sat on the bed. There were a few traces of blood on his body, and he seemed to be seriously injured. However, his tone was very relaxed. No matter what, we're half of the same trade. It's not very nice of you to stab me while I'm injured. On both sides of him stood two expressionless men with short blades in their hands. Since we're in the same trade, you should understand the principle of working for someone who pays you. The man on the right said stiffly, "Besides, you've been on the run for a month, and the number of people in the same trade who died at your hands is probably in the double digits." The middle-aged man turned his body sideways in distress and pretended to think. That many? I really didn't calculate that. The two men stepped forward vigilantly and once again put their opponent in the best position to attack. It's useless. You shouldn't have entered Riva City and fallen into our hands. Accept your fate. The middle-aged man curled his lips. Haha, aren't you afraid that the wind will blow your tongue off? If I wasn't injured, would you be able to get here? You're just a bunch of rats who only dare to add insult to injury. The man on the left heard this, and his eyes flashed. He moved his dagger slightly. Don't be rash. The other man hurriedly tried to stop him. This kid is very cunning. He wants to lure us to attack and destroy our joint attack. Haha, if you don't dare to attack, then why are you here? To chat with me? Come on, I'm very busy. Every minute is worth tens of thousands of gold coins. The middle-aged man mocked. Haha, there's no rush. The two men took another small step forward and continued to shrink the space. If you're busy, you can attack first. Haha, I'm an expert. Don't you know how to attack after the enemy strikes? The middle-aged man's tone was very arrogant, as if he didn't care that the two men were approaching him. But in fact, he was complaining in his heart and sighing that his life was coming to an end. The two men's abilities were on par with his. If they were alone, he could use all kinds of methods to take them down. But if they were together, he would definitely be defeated. Not to mention that there were other people outside the room. At this time, the two men seemed to have lost the interest to continue talking, or they seemed to be worried that they couldn't take the other party's mocking tone. Holding the dagger tightly, they moved forward again. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes and his fingers trembled rhythmically. He couldn't delay any longer. If he let the other party take another step forward, he wouldn't even be able to drag someone down with him. The atmosphere became stagnant, and the air instantly became sticky. The three of them leaned forward, like fierce tigers that were about to pounce on their prey. At this time, any intentional or unintentional action from the two sides would attract the attack of thunder. At this time, dong, 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 there was a knock on the door. The three men's bodies trembled. Their daggers were suspended in midair. Then, the two men who surrounded them took a small step back at the same time. The murderous aura instantly dissipated. Who is it? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 257. Who is it? The two people who were surrounding him were very puzzled. There were people guarding outside the door. Logically speaking, they should not disturb him at this time. Sir, the dinner you ordered is here. The middle-aged man was stunned. He did not order anything. Wait, why does this voice sound a little familiar? The two people were also stunned. They took a step back again and stared at the door nervously. The reason was very simple. If it was a waiter, their people outside would stop him. Opportunity. The middle-aged man did not have time to think about anything else. Seeing that the two people were distracted, his fingers instantly grabbed more than 10 half-moon blades. The two people reacted quickly and immediately shifted their gazes. However, they could not help but panic in their hearts. At this moment, bang, broken wood flew everywhere, and a figure rushed in. It was not the middle-aged man, nor was it the door. The attack actually came from one side of the window. The two of them were shocked. One had to know that they had also ambushed people by the window to prevent this slippery middle-aged man in front of them from escaping. However, the attack happened to come from there. In other words, the other party actually came to the window in this short period of time, killed their companion, and then entered the inner room. Retreat. They were not idiots. To be able to do this, the other party must be an expert. If they did not leave now, they would probably die here. However, it was a pity that the word retreat was only half a syllable when the dense red light arrived in front of them. Ding, ding, ding. The dagger shadows intersected, and the figure flashed. In just a few seconds, the outcome of this close combat was decided. The man standing on the right clutched his chest and staggered back. Blood flowed from the gaps between his fingers. He did not even see the appearance of the person who came before he closed his eyes forever. The other man was shocked when he saw this. He stomped on the ground and was about to break through the door. However, at this moment, the sound of air being torn apart could be heard. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. More than 10 half-moon blades crisscrossed and blocked all his routes. Clang, clang, clang. That person was quite agile. He forcefully turned his body in the air and waved his dagger to block the half-moon blades that were shooting at him. However, puff, the string vibrated strongly. An extremely fast black shadow instantly penetrated his dagger defense and disappeared at his throat. Bang! Like a butterfly with broken wings, that person's body fell heavily to the ground. He twitched for a while, and blood splashed out wantonly. Motherf asterisk her, how dare you provoke me? A middle-aged man with a sallow face walked up with a small crossbow and kicked the corpse on the ground angrily. Who told you to be arrogant? Who told you to kick me when I'm down? After a few more kicks, the middle-aged man was finally done venting. He turned around and opened his arms. Aha! Arthur, you really are my savior. The one who rushed into attack was, of course, Tang Yin. The corner of his mouth twitched. I'm puzzled, Jack. Why is it that every time I meet you, it's always this kind of nonsense? The middle-aged man was naturally Jack, whom he had not seen for a long time. He was still wearing the disguise that Tang and had given him. The heavens are jealous of my handsomeness. I can't help it. After escaping death, Jack was very excited. Tang uncurled his lips. Tell me what's going on this time. Is the Aston family still hunting you down? F***, don't mention this to me. I'm so angry. Jack's face changed, full of bad luck. Do you still remember the mission we took last time? Tang was surprised. Last time? What was it? That crazy woman who wanted to commit suicide. Oh, I remember. Tang nodded. That gorgeous woman had left a deep impression on him. In order to take revenge on her heartless husband, she had painstakingly hired an assassin to kill herself. Tang's heart skipped a beat. It can't be, that's right. Jack looked gloomy. We helped her kill that bastard. It's fine if she doesn't thank us. She even drew our portraits and sent them to the Thieves Guild, Mercenaries Guild, to issue unlimited missions and pay a high price to buy our lives. Tang opened his mouth, completely speechless. How crazy was this woman to be like this? You don't know. Poor me. I had just shaken off the Aston family's pursuit, but I was chased by a series of assassins and mercenaries for a few months. If not for my cleverness and taking off my disguise from time to time, I would have been dead. So I was also targeted. Tang frowned. When he met that woman, he didn't put on any disguise. Yes. Jack nodded and then said, but you don't have to worry. In a few days, no one will be chasing after you. What do you mean? Jack explained the guild's rules. If this kind of unlimited mission is not completed within 3 months, it will be automatically canceled. Is that so? Tang heaved a sigh of relief. Then he raised his eyebrows. But what if that woman continues to do this? She won't. Jack shook his head with a strange expression. When I found out that it was that woman who issued the mission, I want to find her, but she had already committed suicide. She was buried with her husband. After a long time, Tang sighed with a complicated expression. Women, boss, what happened? Michaud rushed in from the door. Don't worry, it's my people. Tang pressed down Jack's hands that were holding the crescent blade. Ah, condition reflex. Tang In patted Jack's shoulder. At this time, he felt the difficult situation that Jack had been in for the past few months. Take care of this body, okay? There's one at the door and outside the window. Yes. Michaud glanced at Jack and then left. Oh, you're doing well. You even found an organization, and you even have subordinates? Jack came up and asked curiously. Tang and waved his hand. Let's talk about this later. It's more important to clean up the tail first. What? There are assassins. Jack's expression was tense again. Yes, there are two in the hall, but they shouldn't be together. Do you want to take a look? Yes, of course, Jack agreed. If I don't kill them all, I won't be able to sleep peacefully. Then let's go. Tang and walked out of the room first. Jack was one of his few friends in the other world. The two of them could be said to have gotten to know each other through fighting. Naturally, he would not sit by and watch this situation unfold. The two assassins in the hall didn't take much effort for Tang In and the others. Tang In and Jack each carried one of the two unconscious people out of the hotel. Using some methods, they successfully obtained information. Tang In's previous guess was right. These two were indeed assassins who came for Jack, but they weren't in the same group as the four above. After they came here, they realized that someone had beaten them to it. It was common for missions to collide. In such a situation, the assassins could either rob or retreat. These two people's strength was average, and they obviously couldn't beat the four who came first. However, they didn't leave. Instead, they stayed to observe. If Jack was killed, then naturally it would be over. But if Jack ran away, or both sides were injured, then they could take advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. It could be said that this little abacus was not bad. Unfortunately, in the end, they waited for Tang In, the god of death, to come. After dealing with the two assassins, Tang In and Jack returned to the hotel again. At this time, the members of the gray space had finished checking the surroundings and didn't find any more assassins. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 258. The next morning, Josiah and his publicist were observing the city and collecting information. The people from the gray space were guarding them in disguise. Tangen didn't follow them. He was following Jack to the west of the city. To be honest, it was a surprise to run into Jack, but he was also a little surprised because he needed Jack's help. Who would have thought? Jack touched the new disguise on his face and sighed. You're actually joining the Gray Coat Army. That's right. Do you want to join and play? Tang In said half-jokingly. No. Jack hurriedly waved his hand, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. How can you be a friend? You drag me down as soon as we meet. You're rebelling. There's no future for you. Not a typo. Besides, I can't stand being controlled by others. It's better to be free on my own. Tang In nodded and didn't try to persuade him anymore. If Jack could join the gray space, it would undoubtedly be a great help. But this kind of thing had to be consensual and couldn't be forced. He then changed the topic. Are you sure you can find what I want? This was what Tang In wanted Jack to help him with. Apart from the black armor, the members of the gray space didn't have any other external tools, which clearly limited their tactics. Of course, Luke's flying eagle bow was an exception, and Jack had all kinds of gadgets on him, so he knew where to get what Tang In wanted. Don't worry, Jack said confidently. As long as you can afford it on the black market, you can find what you want. Some of the items Tang In needed were military contraband and could only be bought on the black market. I hope so. Money isn't a problem. Yo, Jack's eyes lit up as he said enviously, it's good to be organized. From the sound of it, you're rich. Hey bro, I'm tight on money right now. Stop. Tang In hurriedly made a pause gesture and said gloomily, I was wondering why you were so miserable. Every time I meet you, I'm either being hunted down or short of money. How would I know? Jack scratched his head awkwardly and then said thoughtfully, do you think I should find time to go to the church and donate some copper coins to get rid of the bad luck? Tang In was speechless. Donate copper coins? It was more likely that he had stolen the donations. Okay, I'll treat you to a drink after we're done shopping. Okay, Dragons have their ways, and mice have their ways. Jack was completely familiar with the black market. After bypassing the bustling Central Street and passing through a few places that looked like slums, he finally arrived at the entrance of an alley. There were no official guards here. It seemed like anyone could enter. However, Tang Yin smelled the stench of blood from the men who were either sitting or lying around, seemingly bored. As soon as he and Jack appeared here, dozens of gazes flashed over like lightning. However, this only lasted for a moment. The other party sized it up for a moment before withdrawing it. Don't worry about them. Let's go in. Jack saw Tang Yin staring at these big men and said indifferently, "Every black market has its own rules. As long as you don't wear the uniform of the police station, there's no problem." Tang Yin nodded and was about to enter the alley. However, at this time, 3 men and a woman walked out. The man in front had a head of silver hair that was very eye-catching. Tang Yin's eyes flashed and then recovered. He followed Jack and walked past these people. Suddenly, the enchanting woman walking in the middle stopped and turned around. Her eyes were fixed on Tang Yin's back. "What's wrong, Eunice?" the burly man behind her asked in surprise. Eunice did not speak. She frowned, and an invisible aura went straight to the front. The silver-haired man walking in front and a man in a one-piece robe turned around at the same time. This kind of aura was very subtle. Only people with their strength could feel it. However, Tang Yin in front did not feel it. There was no movement, and he continued walking as usual. Ta-ta, until the figure disappeared into the dark alley. The distance between their footsteps did not change at all. Maybe I saw wrongly. Eunice spread out her hands and withdrew her aura. It shouldn't be so coincidental. Well, let's go. The silver-haired man did not care and turned to walk forward. Phew! Feeling the killing intent behind him disappear, Tang Yin slowly exhaled a long breath. A layer of sweat appeared on his forehead under the camouflage. Of course, Tang Yin knew these people. They were the group of bounty hunters who came to rescue the noble youth during the last chaos in the station. Moreover, Goshawk among them died in his hands. Although Tang Yin had narrowly escaped death in that battle, the words "remember him" from these people were still ringing in his ears. Also, the woman called Eunice had fought him directly. Perhaps she was very sensitive to his aura, and thus became suspicious. Fortunately, Tang Yin's camouflage skills were perfect. Also, he learned from Jack last night that he was on the Union's mission list, so he changed his appearance. Otherwise, there was no way he could have survived if they met face to face. It must be noted that these people were all at the peak of the Earth class, so the one leading them should be the mage who had not shown up last time. He had been too careless. It seemed that Luke couldn't use Flying Eagle for the time being. "Here, this is the black market in Riva City. What do you want to buy?" Jack, who had no idea what Tang Yin was thinking, suddenly asked. Tang Yin raised his head and realized that he had walked out of the alley. In front of him was a place that resembled a shopping mall. There were stalls and shops selling goods. "What I want to buy is more miscellaneous. Crossbows, longbows, daggers of better quality, and the kind of flash and explosive crystals that you used before." Tang Yin quickly calmed himself down and listed out the things he had in mind. "That many?" Jack was surprised. He said, "Then let's go to the bigger shops." Immediately, Jack led Tang Yin through the roadside stalls. "Do you want to take a look? This is a branch cut off from a high-quality elven tree. It's perfect for making a magic wand. You're not a mage? That's fine. I'm in a hurry, and you look familiar. I'll give it to you for cheap. You can make a lot of money if you sell it." "I see. How about 10 copper coins? I happen to need firewood for my fireplace. High-quality adamantine meteorite can make your weapon indestructible. How about it? Are you tempted? You can have it for 3,000 gold coins. How about 30 gold coins? That's just enough for the layer of adamantine meteorite powder on the outside." Along the way, the vendors next to them enthusiastically recommended their good goods, but Jack was not moved at all. He could tell the essence of those things at a glance. After they walked for more than 10 meters, no more vendors came up to sell. Tang Yin was amazed by this and could not help but ask, "Are these all fake?" "Most of them are, but occasionally there are good goods. It depends on your eyesight. Jack said casually. Then he pointed to the stalls in front of him. These are all for fleecing those who come here for the first time, or to deceive those who want to find treasures. Tang In nodded. Understood. This was the idea of not opening for half a year, but opening for half a year to eat for half a year. This one is good. Let's go and have a look. When Jack came to a very formal shop, he stopped and walked in. Hello, what can I do for you? The fat shopkeeper immediately greeted them. How much is this? Jack casually picked up a crossbow and asked. The shopkeeper's pea-sized eyes flashed. This is a sand alligator crossbow. 10 gold coins. Hee hee. Jack chuckled and curled his lips. Put away your tricks. We're not rookies. This is a sand alligator crossbow, but it is a short crossbow. Well, I will ask the price again. I must have seen wrongly. The fat shopkeeper slapped his forehead and said exaggeratedly, Sorry, this is a sand alligator crossbow. It should be 4 gold coins and 50 silver coins. What a scam. Tang raised his eyebrows. With his eyesight, he naturally saw that the other party was faking it. Jack did not care and nodded. This price is more like it. Then 3 gold coins. The shopkeeper was really scared this time. He offered 4 gold coins and 50 silver coins just to let the other party get rid of the change when they haggled. He did not expect Jack to haggle to 3 gold coins. He snatched the crossbow. Not for sale. Go away. Are you sure? I want to buy more than 1 crossbow. Jack smiled. The shopkeeper was stunned. Then, his face quickly changed back to a smiling face. Please, let's go in and talk. Where are you? Hurry up and serve tea. Tang was speechless. He finally saw what a profiteer and a chameleon looked like. The 3 of them went in and sat down at a square table. Jack took a sip of tea and then said what he wanted. The shopkeeper's chubby face became happier as Jack's lips trembled. That's all. How about it? Can you get it? Yes, of course. The shopkeeper agreed and then said impatiently, Give me some time. Even if you want a girl in the northern wilderness, I can get her for you. Well, please wait a moment. I will find someone to ask for you. This shop mainly sold all kinds of weapons, but it wasn't difficult to get other things in this place. Jack nodded. I don't object to you finding someone to partner with. However, if the quality is not good, or if you play some tricks, don't expect to get a copper coin from me. After saying that, he gave a look to Tang In, who was sitting quietly. Tang In understood. He reached out and pressed his hand on the table. There was no movement at all. In an instant, his hand sank and embedded into the table. The black market was not a reasonable place. There were simple rules and restrictions here. However, in a conflict, the fist was the truth. Tang In and the others bought so many things. It was hard to guarantee that the other party would not have any other ideas. Therefore, it was necessary to make a small deterrent. The effect of this action was very obvious. The shopkeeper's face instantly changed. His table was made of ironwood, and the other party didn't even use any dough chi, but it was actually almost pierced through. He swallowed his saliva, and his smile became even more flattering. How could that be? My things have always been cheap and good, and I don't cheat anyone. That's good. Sorry to trouble you, boss. Tang In smiled gratefully and reached out to pat the shopkeeper's broad shoulder. The round body jumped 3 feet high and hurriedly retreated. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with his shoulder, the shopkeeper smiled awkwardly again. Then he called out from afar and went out. Tang In, your strength has increased a lot. Jack sighed with emotion. Last night, Tang In had told him his real name. Thinking back to when Tang In first met him, they were barely able to fight to a draw. However, Jack now knew that he had been left far behind. Tang In chuckled. You're not bad yourself. Last night, you took care of an assassin so cleanly. Jack did not deny it. He said gloomily, I was forced to do that. After being hunted for a few months, it is hard not to improve. The two chatted for a while. Then, the shopkeeper carried a big box into the shop. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 259. If there was gold under the gallows, those smugglers would not hesitate to pick it up. This was what a financial officer said many years ago, and it was undoubtedly correct. Not to mention other things, the empire lost countless money every year because of smuggling. The danger was so great that the empire was of course very strict in this area and even enacted relevant laws. But all of this could not stop the smugglers from pursuing benefits, and the key was that some nobles were also involved. Even the financial officer's words had become the smuggler's motto. They used it to remind themselves not to forget to earn any gold coins. The owner of the black market had exaggerated his abilities. In just a few minutes, he had brought over everything that Tang Yin wanted. But F***CK, this is too F***king expensive. Tang Yin walked out of the shop with the things in his arms and couldn't help but swear. Everything cost him a total of 80,000 gold coins, and this was after the discount. Jack slammed the table and spent a lot of effort to lower the price. Tang Yin finally understood why Jack, as a tool thief, always complained about being poor. Be content. Jack, who was also carrying things, said, if it weren't for the fact that you bought so many things, the boss wouldn't have bothered with you. Most of the things in the black market were not available on the market, which was why those black-hearted merchants dared to offer such a high price. They had sufficient psychological advantages, so it was up to you to buy it or not. Tang Yin certainly understood this. He was just complaining before. He raised his eyebrows and said, by the way, is there any qi cultivation method for sale here? Of course, but qi cultivation method. Jack was surprised. Hasn't the tide cultivation method already been given to you? I mean, one level higher than this, or something similar. Everyone's physique was different, and correspondingly, the qi suitable for them was also different. The members of the gray space were now practicing the tide cultivation method, so of course, there would be some that were not suitable. This was the case for little Carol. As a result, her cultivation progress was very slow. Jack was speechless. Big brother, this is not a newspaper that costs 10 copper coins. It's not easy to come across a high-level qi cultivation method, and you still want to hire one? And do you have the money? I have a way to get the money. Just tell me where I can buy it. When Tang Yin and the others came out, Losha handed over some of the gold, silver, and jewelry that he had looted before to them. He wanted to enter the city and exchange them for gold coins. Those were the private collections of the nobles, so they were naturally worth a lot. Jack thought for a moment and said, this thing can only appear at an auction. I'll find time to help you ask around. As they spoke, the two of them walked out of the alley. With so many things on their backs, they naturally attracted the attention of some people. However, after Tang Yin had shrunk the ground to cover a distance of 10 feet, those people had cleverly given up on following him. Not to mention their strength, just this move alone was enough to make them unable to catch up. This place was remote, so Tang Yin and the others naturally could not find a carriage, so they walked towards the central street. At this moment, Tang Yin frowned slightly. He lowered his eyes and scanned the surroundings. For some reason, he suddenly felt a faint feeling shrouding his heart, like a shadow. Was he being followed? But when he looked around, he didn't find anything. Could it be that I'm thinking too much? Although that was what he thought, Tang Yin did not dare to be careless. He followed closely behind Jack like a follower after a moment. Damn it, I'm so tired. Hurry up and call a carriage. Jack put down the things on the side of the road and looked around. As he was talking, suddenly, the sound of galloping horses came from the right. The crowd hurriedly dispersed and saw a group of cavalry in neat armor galloping from the right. It could be seen that their riding skills were very good. They were able to control their horses freely in the crowd. Damn it, we bumped into them when we went out. Jack touched his nose and muttered softly. Tang Yin couldn't help but twitch his mouth, thinking that his luck was bad. They couldn't be blamed for this, because these cavalry's armor was printed with the unique symbol of the Brand Garrison Hall. How could they, as assassins and thieves, be happy about this? Here it comes again. Tang Yin's heart skipped a beat. At this moment, he was sure that someone was following them, because that feeling suddenly fluctuated when he saw the garrison cavalry. Although the degree was very slight, it was still detected by his sharp senses. Who was it? Was it a thief who coveted their things? Or, before Tang could guess the identity of the other party, Jack, who was in front of him, suddenly trembled violently. He instantly took a step back and bumped into him. "What's wrong?" Tang whispered. You. Look," Jack said in a trembling tone, as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. Tang raised his head in surprise. Then, he opened his mouth wide and couldn't close it for a long time. No way, damn it, was this Lion City? Acquaintances one by one. The cavalryman in the lead, who was getting closer and closer, constantly confirmed Twain and Roland's shock. He had a burly body like a bear, a slovenly face, and a black eye patch covering his left eye. Even as he galloped, he did not forget to stretch out his left hand to rub his big red nose. Bose, Lion City's cavalry chief Bose? After confirming the identity of this person, Tang In and the others also saw the middle-aged man beside Bose, who was as straight as a pine tree and had a shrewd aura, Bernie. Looking at the two people in front of them who made all the assassins in Lion City tremble in fear, Tang In and the others felt that it was especially unreal. "Stop fooling around, the old god of light. This is too exciting. I can't take it at all, Bose." And Bugnes naturally didn't care about the two people who seemed to have lost their souls by the roadside. The galloping horses swept past, stirring up bits of black muddy water. Phew! Jack let out a long sigh. His body hunched a little. At this moment, Tang In also recovered from his shock. His long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly. Then, as if he was frightened, his body swayed unsteadily, and he couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. Bang! The black wooden box was flung out. Then, Tang In's body also seemed to have been caught by the swift cavalry. He directly fell to the side in a sorry state. Jack was startled. Such a big reaction. Before he went up to support him, Tang In had already quickly climbed up from the ground. He didn't care about the abrasions on his shoulders and legs. His body was half bent, and he hurriedly said, "Young master, I'm sorry. Young master?" Jack was completely dumbfounded, but after seeing Tang In's eyes, he frowned, stretched out his finger, and scolded angrily. "Trash, are you blind? Can you afford to pay for breaking my things?" I'm sorry. Why are you still standing there like a fool? Pick up the box." Yes. At this moment, the cavalry had already gone far away, and the crowd gathered again. Everyone looked at the servant who seemed to have been reprimanded on the street, and secretly sighed. Sigh, so pitiful. Then Jack called for a carriage, and Tang In laboriously carried the 2 boxes up. Then he sat beside the coachman, silently wiping the blood stains on his arm. As the carriage slowly left, 3 men and a woman walked out from the wall of the street. "Look, Eunice, this is just a servant. How could he be the guy who killed Goshawk?" The burly man said disapprovingly. Eunice, who was beside him, bit her lower lip. "It seems that I was really wrong." "Yes, but the other person looks like a thief." The silver-haired man said gently, "Eunice, don't worry too much. We will definitely avenge Goshawk. Now, let's complete the mission and improve our strength. If we all have the strength of a void-level warrior, it will be easy to kill our way into the Gray Coat Army and find that person." Eunice nodded silently. "Okay, let's go." The magician, standing quietly at the side, waved his magic wand. With a flash of light, the 4 disappeared on the spot. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 260. In the afternoon, Tang In, who had removed his disguise, returned to the hotel alone. Here, in the corner of the tavern hall, Jack raised his hand. They had been in the carriage for a long time, and then Tang In found a chance to let Jack get out. To be honest, he was not sure if they had gotten rid of the tracking. From that subtle feeling, he knew that the bounty hunters from before were following them. The magician's strange methods and the Earth-rank warrior's shocking strength made Tang In feel unsure of what to do. In this case, it was useless for Jack to stay here, and it would even affect the chances of escaping, so it was better to leave. This chapter is 4,300 words. Well, there's no need to doubt. The civet cat deleted too much. I'll make it up tomorrow. Fortunately, Tang In left the carriage and wandered in the remote alley for a long time. He was not attacked, and he did not feel the shadow again. He had escaped a disaster. When Tang In sat down, Jack asked anxiously, "What happened before?" Jack was not a fool, which could be seen from his flexible cooperation at that time. He knew his strength. Tang In looked like he was facing a great enemy, so he had no chance. "Do you remember the people we met before we entered the black market? That woman with a particularly good figure?" Jack blinked twice and recalled. Tang, and touched his forehead. There were 3 men next to her. Was there? Ahem. Jack touched his hair a little awkwardly and asked curiously, "Are they your enemies?" Tang and nodded. "Sort of, they are bounty hunters." Of course, Jack knew about the bounty hunter profession. He was surprised. "How did you get involved with this group of lunatics?" "It's a long story. Just avoid them in the future." Jack was a little shocked. "Are they very strong?" Although he had paid attention to the woman's figure, he did not see the depth of the other party's strength. Jack just thought that Tang and was worried about the other party's numbers. He even secretly thought that if they met in the future, he would play with the other party. Tang and spread out his hands. 3 peak Earth stage warriors, and one is at least at the level of a great magician. Do you think it's high? Jack opened his mouth wide and instantly dispelled the thought of seeking death in his heart. With such an enemy glaring at them from the side, no one would be in a good mood. Thus, the atmosphere at this moment was somewhat heavy. "Come, let's have a drink." Jack picked up his wine glass and pretended to be relaxed. "Don't worry too much. With your disguise skills, there won't be a problem. Didn't you escape today?" Of course, things were not that simple. However, Tang In was no longer the mediocre college student he used to be. He raised his glass and said, "Haha, well said." Ding. He raised his head and swallowed the wine. "Right." Jack wiped the wine stain off his face. "I heard that Bows and Bugneys came here 3 months ago. Now, one is the head of the guards, and the other is the head of the cavalry. I heard that they were originally going to be transferred to the capital of Bran, but they chose to come to the north in the end." At this point, Jack slammed the wine glass on the table with a gloomy face. "Damn it, isn't this just convulsion?" Twain was a little speechless when he heard that. You could have just gone to the capital with good security to get promoted and get rich and enjoy your life. Why did you have to come to the chaotic north to join the fun? Did you have nothing better to do? This news naturally made Tang In and Jack, who were temporarily staying in Riva City, feel depressed. However, after experiencing the terrifying bounty hunter group, they were somewhat numb to it. As the saying goes, when you have too many debts, you don't have to worry about them anymore. After drinking a few more glasses, Jack smacked his lips and sighed. "Tisk TSK, I think you should change your plan. This place is obviously bad luck." Tang In shook his head with a bitter smile. They had considered a lot before choosing this place, and they had done a lot of preparation work. How could they change it so easily? Not long after, Josiah, who had been observing outside for a day, came back with the publicity staff. Everyone gathered in the room and discussed for a while. Finally, they decided to start the publicity tomorrow morning. The location had been chosen, but Tang In suggested that the downtown square, Central Street, and other places should be deleted after looking at it. That was right. These locations were excellent and had the most people. The publicity result was expected to be good, but Tang In knew how powerful Bows was. The city was different from the countryside. If they were to put up a big character poster here, Bows would definitely react quickly when he received the order. At that time, it would be hard to say what would happen. Of course, they did not know Bows, so they had doubts about this suggestion. However, in the end, Josiah accepted Tang Un's suggestion. After all, she was also from Lion City. Although she was not an assassin, she did not know how powerful Bows was. However, she had heard of his reputation and some of his terrifying deeds. The next morning, the sky was still dark. Riva City was quiet. Maybe it was because of the mining, but the sky was always dark. Fortunately, there was no rain. The gray coat army quietly left the backyard of the hotel and walked to the street while kicking the papers. Gradually, sheets of paper that appeared very white in the dark night were spread out one after another. From afar to near, it was like a ray of light at dawn, or like flags fluttering in the wind. Phew, it's so King cold. Not far from the entrance of the police station, two black figures stuck their heads out from a corner. I'm confused. This is your gray coat army's business. Why do you have to drag me into this? One of the black figures sounded angry. We're brothers. Of course, we'll share our joys and sorrows. The other figure looked into the distance and said confidently, Damn, I'm so lucky to have a brother like you. He was obviously sarcastic. How is that possible? You know it too, so I've been reincarnated 3 or 4 times. CKU. Needless to say, the two of them were Tang In and Jack. Tang In was afraid of bows. Therefore, even though it was his first promotion and there shouldn't be any accidents, he still decided to stand guard outside the police station. As for Jack, when one of them was about to stand guard in the cold while his friend was curled up in a warm bed, it was not harmonious at all. There was no love at all. Do you remember the last time we stood guard outside the police station? Tang In asked. Jack held his shirt tightly. Of course I remember. At that time, you were also trying to get bows. You even wanted me to sneak into his office. Knowing a friend like you, TSK. Tang In touched his nose awkwardly. We didn't manage to go in the end. That's because Ghostface showed up. Jack exposed Tang In's explanation angrily. He then turned around and said, Speaking of which, I remember you said you knew Ghostface. How is he now? We didn't hear any news about him after that. Ghostface is dead. Tang In sighed and shook his head. Jack was stunned. He then lowered his head and muttered, No wonder Bose, who swore he wouldn't leave Lion City without killing Ghostface, came here. Just as the two of them were chatting casually, suddenly, a voice came out of nowhere. Clop, clop, clop. The faint sound of horse hooves could be heard gradually. Tang In and Jack were shocked. They looked at each other and said at the same time, No way. Thinking back, when the two of them were at the police station in Lion City, they also encountered such a situation. Fortunately, the sound of horse hooves was obviously coming from outside and not from inside the police station. Tang In and Jack hid deeper into the shadows. After a while, they saw a large group of cavalrymen galloping towards them. Then, the police station's main door opened. Tang In and Jack opened their mouths wide as they stared blankly at the scene in front of them. The cavalrymen looked a little disheveled as they were covered in blood. Some of their armor was broken, and they were directly helped off their horses by their companions. Even the leaders, Bose and Bugnes, seemed to have suffered some minor injuries. Their faces were gloomy. They didn't stay outside for long before people rushed out from inside to carry the injured in. I got it, huh? Jack's expression changed. He couldn't help but chuckle softly. Bose, oh Bose, you finally have a day like this. Ha! His laughter was filled with schadenfreude. Tang In understood at this moment and couldn't help but twitch his lips. Without a doubt, Bose was ambushed. This was unimaginable in Lion City. The triads and assassins would take a detour when they encountered him, let alone provoke him. However, this was Riva City. Bose had only been here for a short period of time. If he wanted to do what he did before, there would be many obstacles. The reality was similar to what Tang In and Jack had guessed. Bose and his men were going to catch an assassin that had exposed his whereabouts. Unexpectedly, they were ambushed by a large number of unknown people on their way. Although they managed to break out of the encirclement, they paid a huge price. This kind of situation was inevitable, and even Bose himself had long since anticipated it. In fact, ever since Bose and Bugnes arrived in Riva City, they had been ambushed many times. At the worst, they were assassinated more than 10 times a day. They couldn't eat or sleep peacefully. However, Bose was still Bose. He would rather break than bend. Despite facing such obstacles, he still insisted on doing what he did before. During this period of time, not to mention those who were killed on the spot, there were countless assassins and bounty hunters who were sent to the gallows by him. If there was an old man in Lion City, he would be very familiar with the situation. This was because the same thing happened in Lion City before. Even Bose's family was assassinated at that time. However, since then, Bose lived in the police station and continued to use ruthless methods. For more than 10 years, he finally suppressed the underworld forces in Lion City. Seeing the situation in front of him, Tangen could not help but feel slightly relieved. After all, if Bose was bothered by these things, their big poster plan would be much smoother. After about 4 hours, there were some people who woke up early on the street. Tang-in and Jack took the opportunity to leave. However, they didn't go back to the hotel directly. Instead, they walked to the places where the posters were posted. Josiah and the rest did the same. They hid in the surroundings and blended in with the crowd. They were ready to see the reaction of the people. As the first poster was discovered, the streets were filled with screams. Then, the crowd quickly gathered. Humans were born with the hidden gene of being a spectator. After a while, people from all over the place joined the crowd. Relatively speaking, the people in the city were more knowledgeable than the people in the countryside. Therefore, they quickly understood the meaning of these strange paintings. Haha, this painting is quite interesting. Gray Coat Army? Does the Empire have such an army? I've never heard of it. I've heard of it. It's a group of people who spontaneously organized it. They say it's to raise the status of the ordinary people. Nonsense. Didn't you read the newspaper? It's obviously a group of mobs and bandits. It's said that they commit all kinds of crimes. Seeing is believing. Hearing is false. There were similar proverbs in the other world. However, no matter which world it was, there weren't many people who could abide by this. Just like how the truth was only a decoration in a dark room before it was proven. However, all kinds of absurd rumors were spreading under the bright sun. In such an era, the circulation of information was very backward. Word of mouth was the most common way, and the most advanced was only the newspaper. Now that the newspaper was in the hands of the brand, they were almost instilling negative publicity about the Gray Coat Army. Along the way, Tangen's expression was a little ugly. Although he had expected that the people would have doubts and resistance about these paintings, the intensity still shocked him. After a lie was spread thousands and thousands of times, it would become the truth, or even an even more exaggerated truth. The image of the Gray Coat Army was like this. Now, these people already had a preconceived official view, so when they encountered conflicting views, they would involuntarily resist and feel disgusted soon. There were already people who began to tear up the posters angrily. Tang-in. Jack looked at the young man in the crowd who was holding shredded paper and shouting, "This is a lie." He touched his nose and turned his head to ask. This young man's clothes weren't too luxurious. He was obviously not a noble. However, he was more fastidious than the average citizen. He should be the son of a rich merchant. This group of people with vested interests was not surprising for them to oppose the Gray Coat Army. This was because the Gray Coat Army's philosophy was somewhat about the distribution of wealth. Don't worry about him. Let's go back. Tang-in shook his head and walked in the direction of the hotel. After returning to the hotel, Tang-in met a group of people who were a little dejected in the tavern's lobby. These people had participated in the promotion of the village and were treated like heroes. Now that they had suffered their first setback here, it was inevitable that they were in low spirits. Gradually, more and more publicity staff with gloomy expressions came back from outside and sat on the bench without saying a word. The atmosphere in the lobby was a little depressing. This made the hotel owner, who was watching from the side, very confused. He secretly muttered to himself, "Did this group of people lose money in business?" Then Josiah walked in from outside. Her expression was still calm. After all, Tang-in had told her before that these things might happen. Walking into the lobby and seeing everyone like this, Josiah couldn't help but be startled. Then, she nodded in understanding and smiled. "What's wrong with everyone? Can't you handle a little failure?" Everyone nodded. Looking at Josiah, who was smiling in front of them, they couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. Moreover, this isn't a failure. At most, it's just a small obstacle. Think about the goal we have to achieve in the end. Compared to that, were these difficulties in front of us? Yes, The hotel owner interrupted. It's normal to lose money and earn money in business. Look at my hotel. It used to be very glorious. Now that it's in this state, I'm still holding on. Perhaps this was the intention of the hotel owner. He was just worried that he wouldn't be able to earn much money after everyone left. However, there was no doubt that this made everyone who had already perked up their spirits couldn't help but laugh heartily. The boss is right. We should learn from you. Boss, then I wish you a prosperous business in the future. Looking at the somewhat stunned Josiah, Tang gave her a thumbs up. The former spread out his hands and stuck out his tongue with a smile. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 261. Although they had experienced a setback, they would not give up on advertising. Furthermore, it was just as Joshua had said, this can't even be considered a failure. After all, there were still quite a lot of people who supported him at the scene. It was just that they who had always been timid and cowardly did not dare to say it out loud. A few hours later, all the posters were removed by the knights from the garrison. Then, they started to search the entire city for the Gray Coat Army. The hotel that Tang In and the others were staying in was checked as well. However, they pretended to be a small merchant group when they entered the city. They told the guards about their identities and the goods they were carrying. Therefore, they passed the inspection easily. In the next few days, Josiah and the others were even more discreet in their advertising. Every time they went out, they would change their appearance and put up fewer posters. Instead, they put up a lot of posters. Therefore, whenever the citizens of Riva City walked on the streets, they would be covered by a large piece of white paper that fell from a high place. It was difficult to catch them in this situation. After all, Riva City was a medium-sized city. Even if the garrison sent everyone out, they couldn't cover the entire city. Also, they didn't have any clues about their target. They couldn't just catch everyone on the street. In the end, the cavalry soldiers from the garrison were like city cleaners. They ran around like they were putting out a fire, collecting all the posters and burning them. Of course, the cavalry soldiers couldn't get rid of people's thoughts. Some citizens even secretly brought the posters back to their homes. Therefore, the Gray Coat Army was the hottest topic in Riva City. Hi, good afternoon. I'll have a cup of light beer. Tang Yin, who looked tired, sat in front of the liquor cabinet and took out a dozen copper coins. The atmosphere in the city was tense. When Josiah and the others went out, he had to protect them with the members of the Gray Coat Army. They had to choose the location, plan the escape route, and monitor the surroundings. All of these things made them very tired. Oh, Mr. Arthur, here you go. The fat shopkeeper quickly took back the copper coins and brought a cup of light beer. TSK, TSK. Tang took a big gulp and suppressed the fire in his throat. He let out a long sigh of relief, then looked up and saw the shop owner flipping through the newspaper. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Boss, what are you reading? After staying for a few days, Tang In and the others naturally became familiar with the shop owner. This guy was the embodiment of a miser in a drama, and he was extremely greedy. However, this was also beneficial to Tang In and the others. Just like a few days ago, when the garrison cavalry came to patrol, he put in a lot of good words for everyone. Although this was from the perspective of earning more money, it was undeniable that he had indeed helped. What else could it be? The Gray Coat Army, the shop owner said casually. Then he opened the newspaper. Look, almost all the pages of a newspaper recently are talking about this. Tang In took out a newspaper and couldn't help but smack his lips twice. The title was written, "Be wary of the conspiracy of the Gray Coat Rebels. Reveal the true face of the Gray Coat Rebels," and so on. The content was needless to say. It was all seemingly real, but when carefully considered, it was full of slanderous rumors. Tang In's heart skipped a beat. He put down the newspaper and said casually, "Boss, what do you think of the Gray Coat Army?" "Me?" The fat shopkeeper was stunned. Then he shrugged. "What did I think of them? I just feel that they're occupying the pages of my favorite aristocratic madams and young ladies' affairs. Does this count? They can do whatever they want. I'll just run my hotel. Ah, that's right. Let them do what they want. Tang curled his lips and chuckled. Of course, this had nothing to do with the shopkeeper who had a business and didn't have to worry about food and clothing. Leader, this isn't a good idea, right? It's okay, we'll do something. Do you want to wait for us to succeed? Captain Arthur, hello. Just as Tang was chatting with the hotel owner, he heard a faint conversation coming from the back door of the hall. He turned around and saw Colin and a few people from the publicity department. Hello. Tang nodded and raised his wine glass. Would you like a drink? Thank you, but no need. We have something to do and need to go out first. Colin smiled. Oh, something to do? Do you need me to go with you? Tang thought that Colin and the others were going out to promote, so he asked. Colin waved his hand. No, we're just going out for a stroll. We won't disturb you from drinking. Tang didn't mind. He nodded, and then Colin and the others walked out of the hotel. Of course, a glass of wine wouldn't last long. Tang was just quenching his thirst, not an alcoholic. He greeted the shopkeeper and walked to the back. As soon as he entered the attic, Tang saw Jack coming down the stairs with a yawn. TSK, you're indeed a mouse active at night. Tang sneered and said with a smile. How about it? Do you want to stretch your muscles and bones? I'll go out with you to play. Damn no. Jack refused without hesitation. I know you're going to drag me out to scout. Tang whose thoughts were guessed, wasn't embarrassed at all. He smiled and said, Scouting doesn't sound good. This is called scouting. Bah, you're the one who's going to prison. Jack spat a few times, and then his face became serious. I'm not doing nothing. Look, after last night, I work hard. Stop, let's talk business. Jack glared at Tang. Well, there's news about the battle energy cultivation method. What? Tang was stunned at first, and then he was overjoyed. To be honest, he didn't have much hope when he asked Jack to inquire about it. After all, advanced battle energy cultivation method was really precious. Most of the people who had it would keep it to themselves and wouldn't take it out. But now Jack actually found out about it. Wait, this kid isn't playing with me, right? What's with your strong sense of distrust? Jack rolled his eyes and said, Your luck is good. Tonight at 6 o'clock in the city auction, there will be at least an advanced battle energy cultivation method. But I heard that a lot of people have rushed over because of it. When the time comes, the price of this thing will be hard to say. Haha, it's good that you have it. Tang laughed heartily and then pulled Jack. Let's go now, go out with me. Jack staggered 2 steps and said in a panic, Hey, what are you doing? I haven't eaten lunch yet. I'll treat you to a big meal later. Now take me to the jewelry store in the city. Don't tell me you don't know. Jack was a thief. Even if he couldn't do it because of his professional habits, he would know the jewelry stores in the city like the back of his hand. After all, looking at the jewelry stores was fun. Tang, of course, wasn't looking for a jewelry store to buy jewelry. On the contrary, he was looking for a jewelry store to sell. The value of the battle energy cultivation method didn't need to be explained in detail. Tang certainly didn't have enough money on him, so he was going to exchange the looted jewelry and diamonds that Losha had given them before. Although these things were stolen goods, they didn't have a mark on them. So as long as he didn't take anything that was too eye-catching, such as the unique crown on the head of the emperor, there was no problem. Jack was very sensitive to the value of these things, so he wouldn't lose out. After wandering around for half a day, the two finally sold the things in batches and earned a total of 340,000 gold coins. Aha, we're rich. After coming out of the last store, Jack couldn't help but become excited. I say, kid, when did you change your profession? So many jewelry? I'm not a thief. Tang pocketed the gold notes and looked at the sky. It's about time. Let's go to the auction house now. Ugh. Jack's expression changed, and he said angrily, I worked so hard for half a day. It's fine if you don't want to share the gold coins, but at least give me lunch. What's there to eat? Shopping is more important. Besides, thieves can't go hungry. F*CKU. 1. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 262. Dusk, East City Auction House. The auction started at 6 o'clock, but carriages had been gathering here for an hour or two. Those who were able to come here were naturally people with some face. Therefore, the carriages were more luxurious than the last, and the horses were more handsome than the last. Later, some ordinary luxurious carriages were even embarrassed to stop here. Perhaps they had already considered this situation, and the auction staff had already started to greet them at the entrance. Nobles, rich businessmen, political elites, and so on walked over in twos and threes, chatting and laughing. They handed over their invitations and were politely invited in. Here, Jack, who was dressed very well, walked out of the crowd. With a wave of his hands, 2 gilded invitations appeared as if they were magic. Tang casually took them and opened them. Atwood. Well, let's go in. Not letting Jack eat was naturally a joke. In fact, the 2 of them had bought a set of luxurious clothes in the city and found a luxurious restaurant to eat before coming here. Not everyone could enter the auction. Most of the things here were more expensive, so some people in ordinary clothes could not enter. Of course, this was not a rule. Everything still depended on whether you had received an invitation or not. Needless to say, the 2 invitations in Tang An's hands were naturally stolen by Jack. After passing through the entrance and a long corridor carved with beautiful reliefs, a very spacious place came into view. There was no need to talk about the seemingly careless but just right decorations around it. Most of the things that appeared in front of Tang An were seats. They were in a semicircle facing the front. There was a slightly higher platform there, and there was a crystal display cabinet more than a meter tall. Needless to say, that should be the place for the auction. Honorable sire, please sit anywhere. The waiter who guided them waved his hand. Of course, the seats here were not casual, at least not in the front row. That was reserved for some important people. Of course, no one would ask for a rebuff. They could just sit there casually. Jack, what are you still standing there for? Tang In, who was sitting on the side of the aisle, asked inexplicably. Wait. Jack gestured and said softly. Twain was stunned for a moment, but he soon knew why. At this time, an old nobleman who looked very noble passed by, and Jack politely stepped aside. The other party nodded slightly to express his gratitude, and Jack quickly bowed in return. F***CK. Right under Tang In's nose, Jack bent down and with a flash of cold light, dug out 3 diamonds from the old noble's belt. With a flip of his hand, the blade and the diamond disappeared. The corners of his mouth twitched. This guy was really dedicated to his work. After the old noble left, Tang In grabbed Jack, who was still waiting on the walkway, and brought him in. What kind of joke was this? He was here to buy a do-chi cultivation method, and he didn't want any accidents to happen. Jack pursed his lips and said unhappily, Tang In, aren't you blocking my path to wealth? Tang In crossed his arms and looked surprised. Oh, really? You can go there yourself. You win. Jack was speechless as he looked at Tang In, who was sitting outside like a door god. With his ability, it was naturally impossible for him to pass through Tang In's obstruction. After a while, all the important figures sitting in the first row arrived, and the auction officially began. A white-haired old man walked to the crystal counter from behind the curtain. With a smile, he bowed and said, I'm honored to meet all of you at the auction in Riva City. I'm the auctioneer of this auction, and I'd like to express my gratitude to all of you. Clap, clap, clap. Since he was able to open an auction house, he must have a powerful background. Of course, they had to show respect to this old man, and everyone applauded. The thunderous applause instantly resonated in the auction house, and the atmosphere was quite grand. Thank you, thank you. Okay. Let's skip the pleasantries and move on to the first item of the auction. This old man knew that these people didn't come here to listen to his nonsense. He knew when to stop, and he went straight to the point. This is the work Salvation of the God of Light by the master artist Medea. This painting is, as the old man introduced the painting, 2 beautiful women wearing rose-red long robes carefully walked out from behind the curtain with a long scroll in their hands. Wow. There was a small commotion in the auction house, and some people started to shout out their bids impatiently. Taste was something that all the nobles valued. Even though most of them couldn't understand the intricate techniques and profound meanings of this painting, they still wanted to buy it. If they bought it and hung it up in the auction house, they would praise it for its taste. Sure enough, after the old man introduced the painting in a fancy way and announced the starting bid, bidding noises sounded one after another. 10,000 gold coins, 15,000 gold coins, 18,000 gold coins. As the bidding noises sounded from all corners of the auction house, the price of the painting rose quickly like a roller coaster. Tisk TSK. So rich. Tang exclaimed. The current price was 25,000 gold coins, which could let more than 100,000 poor people live comfortably for a month. However, in this auction house, it was just a small number for the nobles to show off their taste. In the end, this painting was bought by a young noble for 38,000 gold coins. At his age, it was highly likely that he wouldn't be able to appreciate this kind of painting. However, seeing him salute and thank everyone with a face full of glory amidst the surrounding praises, one could tell that he was happy. He had face, and that was enough. After the appetizers were served, the next auction items were displayed one by one on the stage. There were a lot of things, and some of them were things that Tang In had never heard of before. However, there was no doubt that all of them were precious goods. This could be seen from Jack, who was constantly rubbing his hands. This guy's thieving nature was hard to change, and his hands were obviously itching. Rare minerals, rare treasures, small jewelry. So far, the highest bid was 88,000 gold coins for a pair of purple crystal pendants. This result was not surprising. No matter which world it was, a woman's money was always the easiest to earn, especially when she had a male companion. In the end, the one who won the pendant was a fat and rich businessman. After winning the bid, the woman with the enchanting figure beside him immediately screamed and leaned over to kiss the man's oily face heavily. The auction continued, and there were more and more good things as it went on. Some of them even tempted Tang In, but after weighing the gold notes in his arms, he wisely dismissed the idea. Even so, he was still very uncertain. Previously, he thought that 300,000 gold coins was already a huge sum of money, but according to the current trend, he was afraid that it would be difficult. The big shots in the first row also rarely made a bid, but every time they bid, they would definitely win. On one hand, it was because the prices they offered were not low, but on the other hand, it was because others were giving them face. They were all in this city, and they would see each other frequently. It was not worth offending these people for some small things. Finally, after an hour and a half of the auction, cough cough, the old man cleared his throat and solemnly said, "Next is the last auction item." There was immediately some chaos in the field, and the decibel level instantly increased by a lot. Everyone knew that this should be the Chi mental cultivation method that could only be found by chance, and they all rubbed their hands, ready to fight. The old man took a wooden box that was shining with an unknown radiance from the beautiful woman's hand, solemnly opened it, and raised his hand to light it up. This is a Chi mental cultivation method called the Phantom Moon Mantra, which was obtained by an adventurer team from the ruins of an ancient city. After our appraisal, this should be an Earth-level mental cultivation method. Whoosh! A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples, and everyone in the field immediately clamored. Earth-level mental cultivation method. It was actually an Earth-level mental cultivation method. What did this mean? This meant that as long as your aptitude was enough, you could smoothly rise to an Earth-level martial artist. The power of an Earth-level martial artist was self-evident, and this could completely shake the foundation of a family. In other words, as long as you obtained this mental cultivation method, the development of your family would be strongly guaranteed. I must get it. Tang Yin's body also trembled at this time, and he clenched his fists and instantly made a decision. Because when he saw this mental cultivation method, he had a vague feeling that this mental cultivation method was absolutely suitable for little Carl. Quiet, everyone quiet. The old man shouted a few times, and the field finally calmed down a little. Although this is an Earth-level mental cultivation method, there's one thing I want to make clear. When this mental cultivation method was found, it was already somewhat incomplete. The old man flipped through the book and pointed to the remnant page at the back. But don't panic, everyone. What's missing is only the fragments behind the earth level. Of course, having a defect would affect the value of the item. But even so, it could still rise to an earth-level martial artist's initial stage. Therefore, everyone's desire to get it did not suffer any blow. The starting price is 100,000 gold coins, and the auction begins now. 100,000 gold coins. This would undoubtedly eliminate a group of people. It was not that some small families could not afford this money, but the key was that there was no need. First of all, there were many rich people here, and they would be bidding for nothing. Second of all, if they spent all their money on this, would the families still want to develop? Of course. More people still bid without hesitation. 130,000 gold coins. 150,000. 180,000. In just an instant, the price was raised to 250,000. This was the price offered by an old noble in the first row, and the field instantly fell silent. Everyone began to hesitate. This price was already very high, and it was offered by a big shot. 260,000. 270,000. The people sitting in the first row turned to look at each other, nodding and smiling. Now it was basically a fight between them. At this point, the jump was not big, and most of the time, it was increasing by 100 million. 300,000. It was the first old noble. He turned and smiled. Viscount Winston, I remember that your family has advanced chi cultivation techniques, so don't fight with an old man like me. Haha, everyone wants good things. Viscount Vernal, I'm sorry. A middle-aged noble with a dignified face stood up and bowed with a smile. Compared to the South, the North generally had lower nobility. For a medium-sized city like Riva City, there would at least be a count in the South, but here, Viscount was the highest. 350,000. The field suddenly fell silent, and the people sitting in the front turned to look back in shock. Although the two Viscounts in front of them were laughing and talking, they did not seem to be angry. But in fact, this was also a way to show off their strength. Those small families and rich merchants could not even get a word in, let alone bid. But at this moment, a voice came from behind, raising the price by 50,000 in one go, directly calling out a high price of 350,000. It was a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance, and his face was a little pale. A foreign noble? If that's the case, it's no wonder. This person was Tang En, who had disguised himself. Now, after deducting the change, he only had a total of 350,000 coins. To be honest, he was a little regretful now. If he had known this, he would have bought the equipment in the gray space later. Now he bet all his money in one go, betting that the other party would not follow. After all, although it was an earth-level cultivation technique, it was not as easy as some people thought to train to the earth level. Talent, qualifications, and luck were all important. It was the same reason why those big nobles who had earth-level cultivation techniques did not have many earth-level warriors in their family. Viscount Winston was also stunned, and then he looked deeply at Tang En. I bid 360,000. 370,000. Maybe it was Tang En who took the lead, but a rich merchant bid again. Sure enough, Tang En sighed in his heart. His previous thought was just luck. I have 50,000 gold coins here. At this moment, Jack whispered. Tang En was stunned at first, then he was overjoyed. He did not bother to ask why this kid had so much money but kept crying about being poor. He said, 400,000. Damn. Jack touched his forehead. This guy was really not polite, directly going all in. Everyone was also a little speechless at this time. This guy was really domineering. His bid was 50,000. Too cool. The few people in the front row hesitated when they heard this. Just as Tang En thought, they also knew the knack of it. Having an earth-level cultivation technique did not mean that there was an earth-level warrior. The actual price of this incomplete cultivation technique was probably about 380,000. But since the price had been raised to this point, it was a pity to give up. Finally, the old Viscount Vernal spat out, 410,000. Just as he said before, his family did not have a battle chi cultivation technique. Now that he had come across it by chance, he would not give it up so easily. Sigh. Jack sighed. He knew how much money Tang Yin had, but now it was clear that there was no chance. Just as he was about to comfort him, Tang Yin suddenly got up, flipped out a dagger, and walked up to the auction stage. Jack was shocked in an instant. Was he going to rob him? At this time, the crowd also had the same thought. There was a commotion in the field, but most people looked on coldly. Robbing an auction? He must be tired of living. The reality was exactly so. The auction was a place where all kinds of rare treasures were stored, so safety was naturally the top priority. Robbing here, unless you had the strength to sweep the scene, otherwise it would be a joke. Tang Yin's strength was not bad, but it was certainly not to the point where he could look down on the world. As soon as he flashed his dagger, he felt a few powerful auras instantly lock onto him. One of them was particularly strong. Tang Yin had felt it from the silver-haired man in the bounty hunter group. This was the pressure of a peak Earth-level warrior. He simply raised the dagger. Please help me appraise it. Oh, so that's how it is. Everyone suddenly realized that there was such a rule in the auction. When someone did not have enough money on him, he could use some things as collateral. This white-haired old man was a veteran appraiser. He looked at the pitted dagger, and his eyes lit up. Black meteorite essence. Good stuff. After a moment of silence, he said, "How about 90,000 gold coins?" Tang Yin nodded. There was no need to say more about the origin of this dagger. Jack, who was off the stage, knew it best. The price of 90,000 gold coins was fair. Of course, if it was auctioned, it should be easy to sell for more than 100,000 gold coins. But now that it was used as collateral, it naturally would not be a high price. Okay, I'll bid 490,000 now. Tang Yin neatly stacked up all the gold coins again. You? Viscount Vernal almost spat out blood. How can you increase the price like that? Are you risking your life? This hothead, the situation now was very clear. Tang Yin only had so much money. As long as the other party was willing to pay 500,000 gold coins, he could suppress him. But not everyone was as reckless as him. This price was obviously too high. If he bid again, it would be a fight of personal feelings. He was just a sucker. I'll bid 500,000. Viscount Vernal seemed to have been provoked. He gasped for breath and shouted. The venue was shaken again, and everyone whispered to each other. 500,000 gold coins was basically equivalent to a manor. So what if it was a fight of personal feelings? Even if you don't want to compete, you can still compete. Viscount Vernal finally calmed himself down. Young man, this is not how auctions work. Money is not squandered like this. Today, I'll consider it my win. His age and status were there for all to see. Even though he was also squandering money now, he still said it calmly and confidently. That makes sense. But if you have too much money, you can naturally squander it. Mr. Arthur, I support you. Is 1 million gold coins enough? How about 2 million gold coins? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 263. Sorry, there's only one chapter of 4,000 words today. Raccoon deleted something from the registration form, and a laptop died. I'm a veteran computer noob. In the end, I had to ask someone to reinstall the system. How depressing. If one day you have amazing wealth, what will you do? This was something that many people would think about in their spare time, especially those at the bottom of society. Silk and satin, a life of luxury, and finally return home in glory? Or beauty, surrounded by white beauties, spending 1,000 gold coins to buy a smile. Squandering it? Perhaps it was. Of course, this had no practical significance. It would even be sneered at by some successful people, saying that they had to do it step by step. However, YY was not guilty and was even justified. Because if people didn't often fantasize about a beautiful future, they would numbly accept the present. Tang Yin was quite miserable now. He even pawned the weapon he carried with him, but it was still not enough for the other party's casual words. Except, of course, this was an auction house. It was a place where gold coins spoke, not to mention that he couldn't rob it. However, although he helplessly accepted the current situation, Tang In had already made a decision in his heart. Since he couldn't buy it, he could only wait for the final result to come out and then follow up to Rob. But at this moment, a voice sounded. Mr. Arthur, I support you. Is 1 million enough? How about 2 million? If Viscount Vernal's previous words were said to be imposing, then this sentence was undoubtedly a crushing arrogance. Is 1 million enough? How about 2 million? The tone was casual, as if a woman at the market was considering whether to buy cucumbers or cucumbers. Well, this really wasn't even a question. However, although these words were said lightly, it was undoubtedly a level 10 earthquake in the silent venue. Boom! The crowd was in an uproar, turning their heads to look around for the person who spoke. 2 million, when piled up, was a mountain of gold. It should be known that ordinary small aristocratic families only earned a few 100,000 gold coins a year, but now someone actually threw it out so casually. How could they endure this? Although the nobles paid attention to taste, in the end, it was still the gold coins that supported their superiority. Moreover, with so much money, he would probably be able to get a noble title. Therefore, after the initial shock, some people began to suspect that this person was deliberately causing trouble. But they immediately dismissed the idea, because the person who spoke stood up on his own. His position was in the first row. He was dressed in black and did not look extravagant. He had a mediocre face and nothing special about him. This kind of thick and heavy clothing was what middle-aged and old people liked the most. However, this person had an excessively young face. This could be seen from the hair at the side of his mouth that had not completely turned black. Another unfamiliar face, and a half-grown kid at that. Could it be that all the foreign youngsters were so powerful? Everyone was a little dazed. With their eyes, they could naturally tell that the other party was not a noble. That unconcealable quick-wittedness made him look like a merchant. But could a merchant sit in the first row? Compared to the confused crowd, the Revan nobles sitting in the first row were shocked. Among them, Viscount Vernal's expression was the worst. After all, this young man had just answered his question and even pointed out the main point, which was a slap to his face. However, he took a deep breath as if he was restraining something. He opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. In the end, he just nodded. The young man nodded at Viscount Vernal with a smile and then bowed. Mr. Arthur, long time no see. Tang touched his nose with a complicated expression. Long time no see, Alan. Alan? This name sounds familiar. Ugh, that's the name of my groom. I think I have servants with this name in my house. However, everyone had such a reaction because this name was indeed very common in this world, especially in the farms. Since the farmers weren't very educated, they would always be lazy and come up with such a simple name. Wait, a fat and rich merchant suddenly got excited after thinking hard. Yadong Business Group. Washing machine. This. Wow. Some of them were stunned, some of them gasped, and some of them had a drastic change in expression. Finally, they thought of this person. During this period of time, which product was the most popular? Which business group was the most eye-catching? Without a doubt, it was the washing machine that swept through the entire southern part of the empire. The Yadong Business Group, which became famous because of this item. No one knew how much money they made from the washing machine. They only knew that the ships that came and went on the Leno River were all carrying this item. Alan was the highest leader of this business group. The illusory moon spell was sold for 510,000 gold coins, and Tang got it. Furthermore, no one had any doubts about this result. The auction was a place where gold coins spoke the loudest, and it was obvious that they couldn't compete with him. Therefore, they might as well do him a favor and form a good relationship with him. Although they didn't know him, everyone congratulated Tang In with a round of applause. After all, this was the person who made Alan bow solemnly. If they didn't curry favor with him now, when would they? This was the last item of the auction, and it was naturally dismissed after the auction. However, no one left after a long time, and they looked at the two people who kept talking on the stage. Alan, thank you. Tang In said happily as he put the Earth-level mental cultivation technique into his pocket. Ugh, Mr. Arthur, Alan was stunned and hurriedly waved his hand. Alan, can't accept your gratitude. Without you, I'd still be a poor boy selling houses in the city hall. Besides, this is your money. You get 40% of the profits from the sale of the washing machine. At that time, Tang and had casually signed a contract with Lena and Alan. It was indeed a 4-3-3 split. Haha, no matter what, you've helped me a lot today. Tang patted Alan's shoulder and smiled. I've heard that you've done well. Well, it seems like I didn't misjudge you before. Alan's eyes reddened instantly. He remembered how Tang had patted him on the shoulder and said that he would definitely become an outstanding businessman. He bowed again and said in a choked voice, Alan, I won't let you down. You again. Tang helplessly helped Alan up. You're now the leader of a business group. You don't have to bow so often. No. Alan calmed down and said solemnly, You're the real leader of the Yatong business group, sir. Why go back this time? I'll announce that I'm giving up my position. Ugh. A wealthy businessman who was standing not far away from the two of them and waiting for an opportunity to greet them was dumbfounded. He couldn't even believe his ears. Give up his position as the leader of the Yatong business group? Well, what kind of joke was this? The business group had developed to this point, and its value was immeasurable. As a leader, whether it was the wealth in their hands or the corresponding status, they were absolutely in existence that people looked up to. However, Alan had only said a few words to the person in front of him, and he was actually giving up his position. Nonsense! You're the leader of the Yatong business group. You were in the past, and will always be in the future, Tang said with a serious expression. He actually refused. The wealthy businessman kept muttering. He felt like he was going crazy, followed by jealousy. If you don't want to get lost, I'll do it. No. Before Alan could continue to argue, Tang interrupted him. It's settled then. Don't mention it again in the future. Everyone was the same as a leader, let alone one who was in charge of such a gold mine. However, Tang knew his own capabilities. He was the one who came up with the washing machine proposal. In this respect, he was the one who created the business group. However, if it weren't for Alan's painstaking management, the business group wouldn't have achieved its current glory. Don't think too much about it. I'm actually slacking off. I don't have to work, so I could just sit there and collect gold coins. Huh. Alan opened his mouth to speak, but when he saw Tang's determined expression, he could only smile reluctantly. Tang saw this and felt rather emotional. Although the young man in front of him had turned from an empty-handed kid to a wealthy businessman in a very short period of time, some things had changed. His clothes were still the same, and his personality was still the same. In fact, Alan didn't even have to say that he would give up the position of leader. He had been leading the business group for a long time, and no matter in which aspect, he had already left a deep mark that belonged exclusively to him. It could be said that if Alan didn't give up, Tang wouldn't have been able to do anything. Not to mention that the previous contract had been lost. Even if it was still there, it was just a simple agreement to share the profits. It didn't even mention the issue of who would be the leader. However, Alan still said that he would give up the position after only a few words. This young man who had walked out of the slums had an almost stubborn mind. Whoever gave him bread, he would give him cheese. Well, you embarrassed him today. Will it have a bad effect? Tang changed the topic and asked Vernal and the others who hadn't left yet. No, Alan shook his head. They're only thinking about how to befriend me now. Oh, Tang raised his eyebrows. It's like this. After Alan's serious explanation, Tang finally knew the reason. Not long after Tang left Lion City, Lena successfully improved the washing machine and quickly produced a batch. This thing was undoubtedly valuable, but how to sell it became a problem. In the end, Alan had an idea and thought of promoting it through the auction. Facts proved that this idea was successful. The washing machine caused a strong reaction in the aristocratic circle, and the demand soon exceeded the supply. However, no matter which world it wasn't that simple to do business. Soon, the aristocrats and business families in the city had their eyes on this fat piece of meat. At this time, Alan knew that it was impossible to make a fortune alone, So after some consideration, he took the initiative to visit the aristocrats and business groups with the highest status in the nearby cities and propose cooperation. After some checks and balances, those forces gave up the idea of swallowing it alone and turned to full cooperation. Alan had the manufacturing method in his hands. The aristocrats had strong connections, and the business families had a complete marketing route. With the cooperation of these forces, the sales of the washing machine went on the road of rapid development. Since this method was feasible, Alan naturally continued to promote it. The southern cities of the empire were eroded one by one. Now, Alan had his eyes on the northern market, and Riva City was one of the stops. In fact, Alan had only been here for half a day, but the viscounts and aristocrats with a keen sense of smell in the city had already surrounded him. Everyone knew that as long as they got the distribution rights of the washing machine, it would be equivalent to getting an assembly line to produce gold coins. The benefits were self-evident. However, Alan's vision was very broad now. In the capital of Bran, he had even met the Grand Duke, so he didn't need to care about these northern viscounts. Moreover, Riva City was a medium-sized city, so he didn't need too many channels to sell the washing machine. Therefore, he only gave 3 slots. In a situation where there were too many wolves and too little meat, these aristocrats suppressed their colleagues and tried to befriend Alan at the same time. This was also why, when the viscounts in the auction house knew that Alan knew Tang In, they simply gave up on competing for the Earth-level mental cultivation method. Otherwise, even if Tang In had a lot of gold coins, they would still be unable to do anything. If they were forced into a corner, they could still use some tricks. After all, Tang In was just an outsider, and the aristocrats had no doubt that they had the upper hand here. TSK, not bad, not bad. Tang In smacked his lips and praised. He was even more certain that Alan was the most suitable candidate to be the leader of the business group. Mr. Allen. At this time, an old man with a ruddy face walked over. Sorry. I'm the owner of this auction house. I didn't know you were coming, so I didn't greet you personally. Here, these are your things, right? After he finished speaking, he handed over a dagger that was full of holes and a wooden box. Needless to say, the dagger was naturally the one that Tang In had pawned. Alan had seen Tang In kill people, so this dagger was still fresh in his memory. Previously, he had used this dagger to recognize the disguised Tang In. As for the wooden box, there were 510,000 gold coins in it. Seeing this, Tang In and Alan looked at each other and smiled. There is no doubt that this old man did this because he wanted to get the distribution rights of the washing machine. Alan took the dagger and handed it to Tang In, ignoring the wooden box below. Just as the old man's face was filled with disappointment, Alan said, "Can you auction washing machines here?" The old man was stunned, then he was overjoyed. "Yes, of course. This is the auction house's honor." Then I look forward to working with you." Alan nodded. Since the other party had an auction house, they had the ability to sell. In addition, Alan had met Tang In here today, so he was in a good mood and naturally agreed. Of course, the latter was the most important reason. Thank you. The old man kept bowing, his tone emotional. All of this was naturally seen by the surrounding people. Immediately, hundreds of scorching eyes stared at the old man. There were a total of 3 places, and now only one had been confirmed. How could they not be envious? To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 264. The reunion didn't last long. Although Alan kept inviting him to the business group's residence, Tang In declined politely in the end. This was indeed not the place to talk. He was now carrying the name of the Grey Army. Once exposed, not to mention Alan, even if the entire Yadong business group were to put pressure on him, it would be useless. Alan seemed to have realized something. Although he didn't know that Tang In was on the path of rebellion, he knew that Tang Un was an assassin. He must be up to something by disguising himself. Therefore, he had to leave his contact address and said that he would stay in Riva City for 2 days. Tang In nodded and agreed to go to the business group's residence. Then, he signaled Jack with his eyes and walked toward the exit of the auction house. After all, they came in using a special method. Now that they had attracted attention, they had to leave as soon as possible. However, Tang In soon realized that it was unnecessary. As soon as he left, the nobles behind him swarmed up and greeted Alan eagerly. Amidst the chaos, Tang In walked out of the auction house. "Hey, Master, you're here. This way." "Master, do you think we should take a taxi or a taxi?" Jack, who had left first, was guarding the door. He looked like a servant with his head lowered and a smile on his face. Tang In rolled his eyes. "F***, what are you doing? Acting? Keep acting," Jack said with disdain. "I can read lips. TSK, you're so good at hiding. You're the new leader of the Yatong business group. What do you think? Help me out." Tang In didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at Jack, who was full of praises. "F*** off. Go play somewhere else." "Sigh, I knew it. Some people forget they're poor friends when they become rich." Jack shook his head with a mocking expression. "That's enough." Tang In touched his nose and curled his lips. "Some people have 50,000 gold coins in their pockets, but they still want to eat and drink. What kind of logic is that?" Ahem. Jack's expression changed. He was a little embarrassed. However, he quickly put on a lazy expression and rolled up his sleeves. Who is this? You're too shameless. Tell me, and I'll despise you too." Sure enough, being despicable is the passport of the despicable. The ancestors didn't deceive me. Tang In sighed speechlessly. Then he clenched his fists and said, "Contempt is useless. I suggest that we use our fists to make him understand the truth. And am I right, Jack?" "Huh." Jack shuddered and instantly took 2 steps back. He forced a smile and said, that. "Hey, today's weather is not bad. Look, it's sunny and windy." Tang In looked up at the gloomy evening sky, and the corners of his mouth twitched. After teasing each other for a while, the two of them finally hailed a carriage and headed to the hotel. Tang In was naturally satisfied with tonight's results. Not only did he get the Earth-level mental cultivation method without spending a single cent, but he also accidentally met Alan. TSK. He forgot to ask about Lena's recent situation. "How was it? Did you get anything?" Tang In looked up and asked. Opposite him, Jack was holding the illusory moon tactics. His expression kept changing as he fell into deep thought. Seems like there was a little. After a while, Jack closed the book and slowly stroked it as he said this ambiguous sentence. Jack naturally had fighting aura. His current strength was stuck at the bottleneck of the peak of the intermediate martial artist level. The most important reason was that he was only practicing a normal mental cultivation method. The highest he could reach was this. Although he had the Earth-level mental cultivation method in his hands, it wasn't a combat skill. Naturally, he couldn't practice it casually, unless Jack was willing to give up his cultivation and practice the illusory moon tactics from the beginning. Of course, this was impossible. Not to mention his age, he was currently being hunted down. Giving up his cultivation would be courting death. However, although he couldn't practice it directly, he could still use it as a reference. The illusory moon tactics was an Earth-level mental cultivation method. Naturally, there were some points to pay attention to when breaking through from the intermediate level to the advanced level. There's also the way to circulate the advanced level fighting aura, and so on. These were all extremely beneficial to Jack. It was like building a building. The lower floors were already done, but the design of the upper floors hadn't been completed yet. At this time, it was naturally a good idea to learn from a building that had already been built. Of course, he couldn't copy it exactly. After all, the style will be different. Tang In nodded in satisfaction. That's good. Encountering a bottleneck in cultivation couldn't be rushed. It was common for some people to cultivate bitterly for years without making any progress. Under such circumstances, some sudden feelings and inspirations were extremely precious. 10 minutes later, the carriage stopped at the street next to the hotel. There was an assassin and a thief here. The safety awareness of hiding places was engraved in their bones. Tang Yin and Jack got off the carriage and immediately observed their surroundings. Everything was safe and sound. Then, they walked toward the hotel. However, just as they reached the street where the hotel was located, their footsteps suddenly stopped. Townsfolk were gathering in twos and threes. After a while, discussions could be heard. However, although the number of people kept increasing, there seemed to be something in front of them. The crowd couldn't continue moving forward. Tang In and Jack looked at each other. Their expressions changed drastically. Then they each stepped on the wall by the roadside and suddenly jumped up. F***CK. Tang In's long and narrow eyes instantly narrowed as he cursed in his heart. At the front of the crowd, there were more than 10 soldiers in neat uniforms. They were on guard with their spears raised. The police station. Tang In's expression turned even uglier. The first thing that came to his mind was that their address had been exposed. The hotel was in the center of the street, and the street just happened to have an arc here. With all kinds of buildings blocking the way and the dark sky, Tang In and Jack couldn't see the situation inside at all. What do we do? After they landed, Jack came over and asked. Obviously, his judgment was that something had happened to the hotel. Tang In quickly observed the surroundings and pointed with his right hand. Go around here, boss. Tang In was shocked. He suddenly turned his head and saw David appear at the entrance of the alley, not far away. He quickly walked over and asked anxiously, What happened? Where are the others? Everyone is fine. They've all retreated. Boss, come with me first. After saying that, David turned around and entered the alley. The three of them moved quickly in the winding alley, and David began to explain the current situation in a low voice. Tang In and Jack's prediction was right. Something had indeed happened to the hotel. At this time, a large number of garrison cavalry had blocked off the street, and the ones who brought them here were Colin and the others whom Tang In had met at noon. How is that possible? Are you sure it's them? Tang In asked in shock. Tang In knew Colin. The young team leader of the publicity department had given him a good impression. He was optimistic, positive, and full of energy. Yes, it must be them, David said with a gloomy expression. It turned out that Colin and the others had gone to the city square to post flyers without permission in the evening. Not long after, the garrison cavalry in casual clothes suddenly arrived and caught them red-handed. Normally, when people like Colin and the others went out to advertise, there should be members of the gray space accompanying and protecting them. However, a few days ago, it was Tang In who had advised them not to go to the city square, so Colin didn't inform the gray space and acted alone. Although he had chosen the better time in the evening, he didn't know how powerful Bose was. Fortunately, at this time, a member of the publicity department happened to pass by and saw this scene. He was shocked and hurried back to report it. After Michaud heard about it, he made a prompt decision and immediately led all the people to withdraw. Not long after, the garrison cavalry arrived. F***CK, this idiot. Jack slammed his palm and cursed angrily. Of course, he knew how terrifying Bose was. The garrison cavalry under his lead was definitely not comparable to those in other cities who reacted slowly. Tang In's face was gloomy, and he was silent. Not long after, Tang In saw Josiah and the others in an abandoned house with a complicated expression, as well as the fat shopkeeper and waiter who were sitting in the corner, looking uneasy. Tang. Because of the philosophy, there were very few traitors in the Gray Coat Army, especially the ordinary people who had been bullied in the past. So, after joining for a few months, this was the first time Josiah had encountered such a situation, and she couldn't help but panic. However, after seeing Tang In, her heart suddenly calmed down. Tang In nodded and patted Josiah's shoulder. Don't worry, as long as everyone is fine. Josiah bit her lips and nodded slightly. Boss, they're here. On the roof, Michaud suddenly said. This abandoned house was actually not far from the hotel. Lying on the pointed roof, one could even see the main entrance of the hotel. By the time Tang In and the rest reached the roof, through the bright crystal pillars, they could see that the area around the hotel was densely packed with garrison cavalrymen. who were moving forward with their backs bent. On the left, a majestic man with a black eye patch on his left. I pointed around and asked the two young men behind him who were beaten black and blue. Needless to say, the former was naturally Bose. As for the latter, it was Colin and another publicity staff. Damn it, this traitor! David suddenly gritted his teeth and cursed angrily. It turned out that under the light, Colin was constantly nodding and bowing, gesturing eagerly. Originally, if you weren't strong enough and were caught, that would be fine. Taking a step back, if you didn't have the courage to commit suicide and couldn't withstand the punishment, then you would finally confess. Although this was despicable, it was slightly understandable. But now, you actually brought people over so quickly, and you even acted like a lackey. This made people gnash their teeth in anger. Michaud narrowed his eyes and slowly moved to Tang Yin, who was comforting Josiah softly. Boss, Luke is ready. He can shoot these two traitors to death at any time. Although everyone was out of danger, this was only temporary. As long as Colin and the others told them the number of people on this side and their appearances, they would be unable to move an inch. Moreover, Colin was the team leader and knew everything about publicity. If he confessed, then the Grey Coat Army's First City publicity plan could be declared a failure. Therefore, Colin and the others had to die. Tang and turned around and looked at the roof a few hundred meters away. A blurry black figure was pointing down with a bow and arrow. There's no problem with Luke's retreat route, Michaud added. Okay. Tang Yin frowned and looked down at Colin, who seemed to be competing to show off. He suddenly shook his head. Wait a little longer. Okay. Michaud opened his mouth in surprise and then retreated. Bose seemed to be impatient and turned his head again to ask something. Colin was still bowing and groveling until they reached the front. Soon, they arrived 100 meters away from the hotel. At this time, Colin seemed to be ashamed and timidly took a few steps back. He then raised his finger and pointed to the left, indicating that it was there. David and the others were surprised because Colin was pointing in the direction of a 2-story building, not the hotel at all. Conscience? But they had already brought people here. Was there any point in doing this? At this moment, Tang Yin's eyes suddenly narrowed. Colin, who was retreating, suddenly pulled out the sword of the cavalryman beside him and instantly stabbed it into the chest of another propagandist. The propagandist clutched his pierced heart and fell down in disbelief. But when he saw Colin's disdainful eyes, he suddenly understood something. Run! The roar in the silent night reverberated in the air for hundreds of meters. The cavalrymen around them paused. Their attention was focused on where Colin was pointing. In addition, among the 4 or 5 people they caught, these two were the most afraid of death and didn't look for an opportunity to commit suicide. Even the one called Colin kept asking if he could redeem himself by doing some meritorious service. Run! With another long roar, Colin slashed his sword across his neck. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out in the distance. A blue spear suddenly appeared and pointed at the body of the sword. Colin's sword instantly fell out of his hand. Hey! A vigorous middle-aged man stepped forward in an instant and pinched Colin's chin, but the latter had already spat out something long. He had a mocking smile on his face, and blood gushed out of his mouth like a tidal wave. Motherf asterisk her. Search house by house. Bose, who had come back to his senses, roared. The cavalryman hidden in the dark rushed out and fiercely smashed open the side doors, entering the house to search. Bugnes, how is it? Bose turned to the middle-aged man and asked. Bugnes let go of Colin's shin and spread out his hands, laughing bitterly. He bit his tongue to commit suicide, just like the others. This little bastard from the Grey Coat Army. Bose's face was full of anger, but in the end, he let out a long sigh. He's really ruthless. Bugnes nodded silently in agreement. At this time, they also knew that Colin wasn't afraid of death. He had been groveling all this time just to find an opportunity to kill a companion who didn't want to commit suicide. He was really ruthless to others, and even more ruthless to himself. In the distance, there was silence on the roof. Everyone was completely shocked by this sudden scene. Colin, who was originally thought to be a traitor, had proven himself right under their noses. Whoosh, the roof tiles moved slightly. David crawled back a few steps, stood up, and bowed 90 degrees to the other side of the roof, his face full of shame. When everyone saw this, they silently retreated, stood up, and bowed. After a while, Tang Yin straightened up and let out a long sigh. Let's go. To be honest, when he saw Colin's abnormal behavior, he had already expected it. But when he saw it for himself, he was still shocked. Colin's body was thin and weak, and he didn't have much strength. Therefore, he worked as a clerk, and this was probably his first time killing someone. However, such a minor character had managed to successfully deceive Bo's eyes. In an impossible situation, he had managed to turn the tables with a single strike. Tang! Josiah suddenly raised his slightly red eyes and looked directly at Tang Yin, saying firmly, I want to do something. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 265. The next morning, the gloomy weather that had accumulated for a few days finally started to show its power. He kicked down the rising sun in the east and scattered the fine needles, one after another. The rain wasn't heavy, but it was very annoying. It lasted for a few hours, and it was still in this half-dead state. It seemed like it was purposely trying to test the patience of the nobodies below. Unfortunately, the people in the north were already used to this kind of treatment. Therefore, the nobles were still busy attending all kinds of parties, and the civilians were still working hard to make a living. The power of habit was strong, just like the people in Riva City today. They felt like something was missing after they woke up in the morning. What was it? Looking at the gray walls, they suddenly realized that the white paper that would appear every day was missing. No matter how the brand officials advertised that the Gray Coat Army was a group of thugs, there would always be people who were touched after seeing those posters. Because what was written and painted on those posters was very realistic. It was an indisputable fact that the nobles bullied the civilians. It was also an indisputable fact that the nobles lived an extravagant and luxurious life. It was also a fact that the civilians lived in ragged clothes and didn't have enough food to fill their stomachs. All of these happened almost every day, and it wasn't something that could be covered up by the simple descriptions in the newspapers. Therefore, even though the notice in Riva City forbade people from collecting posters, some people still secretly hid them. They would take them out when they were tired from work, or when they were having a meal, or when they were dreaming in the middle of the night. They would carve their most hated names on the fat nobles and curse them to their heart's content. Spiritual victory? Yes. Although it was useless, it would still make them feel better. Therefore, they would bring these posters home almost every day. There were too many people who hated the nobles. But today, those posters disappeared. Some people walked through a few streets, but they still couldn't find even one poster. Did they give up? Or were they caught? No one knew, just like they didn't know that a storm was slowly forming in the drizzle. The Riva City Guard Hall. Cavaliers were walking in and out of the hall. It was very busy here. If there were tourists who passed by here, they would exclaim about the security of this city. No one would have thought that this place was deserted a few months ago. Bang! The door of the guard hall was kicked open. Damn it! Can't you learn how to knock on the door? Bose removed his legs from the table as he roared. The lock is broken. Why are you knocking on the door? Needless to say, only the Bugnes could do such a thing and speak to Bose in such a tone. After fixing the bandage on his shoulder, Bose said angrily, You still have the face to say that? You were the one who broke it. All right. Since when did you learn the habit of being the chief of guards of Lion City? Bugnes curled his lips indifferently. Then he saw the bandage and raised his eyebrows. Injured again? Weren't you fine last night? Bose waved his arm casually. Last night, I went out to look for food. There was a mole who didn't know what to do. Oh. Bugnes nodded and did not ask any more questions. The mole was, of course, an assassin. If it were anyone else, even if they weren't killed, they would make a fuss about nothing. However, this was normal for Bose and Bugnes. Ever since they came to Riva City and became the chief of guards, being assassinated was a common occurrence. Sometimes it was even more than 3 times. If they were not assassinated for a few days, they would feel uncomfortable somewhere. Then, they would gather their men and take the initiative to look for moles to move around. Here, this is the list of moles we caught this week. Send it to the judge. Bugnes handed over a wrinkled paper. What an unnecessary move. What's the point of a judge? Just send them to the gallows. Bose rubbed his red nose and took the paper. Bugnes chuckled. Huh, you'll have to wait until you become a judge. Then, he looked down at the huge footprint on the table and shook his head. He swept away the pile of letters and sat on it. What's this? Why is it piled up so high? What else could it be? Letters of protest from the nobles. Bose scratched his nose and wiped it with a piece of paper. He did not seem to care. The two of them had stirred up a storm in the city and destroyed many gangs. Of course, some of them were related to the interests of the nobles. Huh, there are so many of them? Bugnes was surprised. He looked at the letters all over the floor. If this was the case, they would have to pack up and leave Riva City. Bose shook his head. No, most of them were sent recently. They want us to find the Gray Coat Army in the city. It seems that the propaganda in the city is giving them a lot of pressure. Bugnes rubbed his chin and chuckled. That's right. When I saw it, I wanted to beat up those nobles. What the hell are they doing? Bose was talking about the propaganda with words on it. It was all about the Gray Coat Army being bullied by the local nobles. With Bose's years of experience in solving cases, he could tell that it was true. Bugnes shook his head. It's none of our business. Well, no matter how much pressure they feel, it's useless. They missed their chance last night. Yeah. Bose heaved a long sigh. The scene last night was still vivid in his mind. The few members of the Gray Coat Army really made him feel emotional. 3 of them committed suicide by biting their tongues when they were caught. As for the other 2, the one named Colin confessed before they arrived at the police station. Now that he thought about it, it was obvious that he did not want them to have a chance to get more information out of him. What happened after that was needless to say. Bose could not help but shake his head when he thought about it. He felt like he had been hunting geese all day, only to be pecked blind by the geese. As for the subsequent search, although they were able to confirm their previous lodgings, the hotel was already empty. Then they searched the whole city, but they could not find them. This was expected. The city was so big, and it was nighttime. If they missed the hotel, they would not be able to catch them again. But I heard that the propaganda was gone this morning. I guess they were scared after this incident, so they temporarily hid. Bugnes guessed. That's possible. Bose nodded and said, but it's better if they can leave Riva City. I only want to catch them all now. I have no interest in them. Sir. Just as Bugnes was about to reply, a voice came from the door. He turned around and saw a cavalryman standing at the door, sweating profusely. He kept looking at the footprints on the door. Come in, what's the matter? Bose stared at Bugnes. Bugnes curled his lips and jumped down from the table. Someone reported that the Gray Coat Army is doing propaganda in the square in the city. What? Bose and Bugnes exclaimed at the same time. They looked at each other. They just said that the enemy would hide for a while, but now they were here. Looking at the cavalryman who wanted to say something, Bose frowned. There's more. Yes. I heard that the nobles sent their guards to disperse the crowd, but they fought in the end. F***. Who is this idiot? Bose slapped his forehead and was completely speechless. Of course, he knew the nobles' habits. Disperse? It should be a beating. If it was a normal situation, this method might be able to suppress them. But if the Gray Coat Army was at the scene, didn't they hear that they fought? The situation was obviously out of control. Pass down my order. All the cavalrymen in the hall gather at the door. Rewind time, an hour ago. The location was the square in the city. Although it was drizzling, the number of people in the square was not less than usual. It was still bustling with people. Since it was a square, of course, there were fountains and decorations. In the center of the square, there was a heroic figure of a noble maid of red ore. This was the first mayor of Riva City. It was under his rule that many mineral veins were discovered around the city. However, the discovery of the mineral veins did not bring any benefits to the residents of Riva Town. On the contrary, it brought them endless pain. The farmlands were quickly occupied and built into roads. The residents were also tricked into becoming miners and hiding in the caves. In the end, they realized that they had nothing except for some pitiful money. Even the old houses had been demolished and turned into narrow slums. In contrast, there were more and more nobles here. The reason was simple. They were all here to fight for the mineral veins. Because there were no more farmlands, the residents had to become miners in order to survive. After the city was built, the nobles even claimed that the residents of Riva Town had gloriously become citizens. But in reality, these residents had become poor. Just as the pedestrians in the square were about to walk to the opposite street, a group of people dressed differently appeared. At first, no one paid attention to them. There were thousands of people in the square. Who would pay attention to strangers? But then, some people stopped and stared blankly at the group of people who went straight to the red noble statue. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the whistling sound, raindrops splashed everywhere. In an instant, the red statue was tightly tied by the ropes in the hands of the group of people. Then, with a loud roar, the ropes tightened and the soil under the red noble statue started to loosen. Then it tilted, shook, and fell. Boom! Rocks flew everywhere. The red glaze on the ground was like a blooming flower. It was very beautiful in the rain. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.